An old man lies above the earth, held up by 1,000 arrows, like a strange thorned bed. His eyes are open, calm, waiting, not for help, but for the sun itself to turn. Around him, warriors who have spent their lives learning how to be hard suddenly forget how, and stand quiet as temple stone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Now you're back in the open air. The wind is cooler here, just before sunrise, and it carries the wet, clean scent of a great river. You're standing on the banks of the Ganga, long before the roar of conches at Kurukshetra, long before that arrow bed ever waits for anyone. Mist moves over the water in slow, pale sheets. It curls around reeds and low stones. It touches your ankles like a blessing and then slips away again, shy as a deer. Behind you, the land is still half asleep. A few trees hold on to the last darkness. A fire somewhere is being coaxed into life, thin wood smoke, the soft crackle of twigs, the first hint of ghee warming in a pot. Birds begin their morning arguments in the branches. They sound offended that dawn keeps arriving without asking permission. And then you notice him. A young king stands near the water, alone in a way only a king can be. No one close enough to touch him. A whole world depends on where he places his feet. His clothes are fine, but he's not dressed for court. This is the edge of the world, not the center. His name is Shantanu. You can feel the restlessness on him, the kind that makes a man leave silk cushions behind and come walking to a river at dawn, as if the river might have an answer. He breathes in, once, twice. The air tastes like damp earth and lotus stems, cool on the tongue, clean enough to make you want to rinse your thoughts in it. Shantanu looks out across the water, and the mist shifts, just for a moment, as if something is moving inside it. Not a fish, not a boat. Something with intention. You hear the softest sound of bangles, the faint chime of metal against skin, and it's so delicate that for a heartbeat, you wonder if you imagined it. But the king doesn't. His head turns, his attention sharpens. The river is wide here, steady and patient, the kind of patience that makes men forget their own tempers. The current slides by with that low, constant hush, like a mantra being repeated without any need for applause. And then she is there, a woman on the riverbank, luminous in the mist, as if the dawn decided to take a human shape for a while. Her hair is dark and wet at the ends. Water clings to her like jewelry. She stands with a calm that doesn't ask permission from anyone, least of all from kings. You're close enough to sense how the world tightens around her presence. The reeds stop trembling. Even the birds pause mid-complaint. Shantanu takes a step without meaning to. It's almost funny, watching a man who commands armies suddenly forget what to do with his own feet. A king brought to helplessness by a riverbank. No minister can prepare you for this. No scripture gives you a strategy. His breath catches, and you catch it too. The air is cool, but his skin warms as if he's walked into sunlight. He doesn't call out, not yet. He just watches. And the watching becomes its own kind of offering. The woman moves along the water's edge, and her footprints don't quite seem to press into the mud. She's there, and she isn't. She's as real as the river, and as impossible as the river's source. Shantanu follows at a respectful distance. You follow too, careful with your steps. The mud is slick in places, gritty in others. It clings to the soul the way old promises cling to the heart, quietly, stubbornly. The smell of jasmine drifts in from somewhere upriver, mixed with the sharp green scent of crushed leaves. A fisherman's net lies in a heap nearby, still wet, still smelling of last night's catch. The woman pauses. She looks out at the flowing water as if she's listening to it speak. Shantanu stops as well, caught between wanting to rush forward and some instinct deeper than etiquette. He has hunted lions. He has judged disputes. He has sat on the throne with the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders. None of that helps him here. The woman turns her face slightly, and Shantanu finally dares to come nearer. He tries to hold himself like a king. He really does. But he's also a man, and men, even royal ones, have a habit of becoming foolish near miracles. You can almost hear his thoughts stumbling over each other. He wants to ask her name, her lineage, her home. He wants something ordinary to hold on to. Instead, he can only offer his presence. The river answers for her. A gust of wind rises and slips under your clothing, cool and quick. The mist swirls and briefly opens a window of clear water, reflecting the paling sky. For a blink, you see your own face in that reflection, sleepy, quiet, drawn into something ancient. Then the mist closes again. Somewhere, a conch sounds from a distant shrine, low and long, not a battle call, just a temple greeting the day. Bells answer it, faint as silver threads. Shantanu speaks to her then, softly, as if he's afraid that louder words might break her. He offers respect first, then he offers his heart, almost before he realizes he's holding it out. The woman listens. You watch her expression, serene, unreadable, like deep water. And you feel, in your bones, that she will not be won the way kingdoms are won. This isn't a hunt. This isn't conquest. This is the river deciding whether it wants to step onto land. A little humor slips in with the dawn. Shantanu, whose orders can move whole battalions, is now waiting for a single nod from a woman who smells like rain and eternity. Kings can be terrifying. Love makes them polite. The woman finally gives him a condition, not shouted, not dramatic. A simple boundary, placed as naturally as a stone, placed on a riverbank. Shantanu accepts. Of course he does. Men in love accept things without reading the full weight of them, the way a sleepy pilgrim accepts prasad without asking what's in it. The river keeps flowing. The light grows, and somewhere far in the future, an old warrior will lie on arrows and wait for the sun's turning, because a vow once spoken does not loosen easily. But for now, you stay here at the beginning, on the Ganga at dawn, mist on your skin, wet earth underfoot. A young king standing too close to a goddess, not knowing that the river is about to take 7 sons from him before it leaves him one. One boy, one survivor, one terrible promise waiting, like a shadow at the edge of morning. But before there was an old man on a bed of arrows, there was a boy. And before there was a boy, there were 7 small bodies floating down a river. The sun is higher now, and the mist has thinned into bright threads over the Ganga. You are still on the bank, sandals damp, the smell of river mud and crushed reeds rising as the water slides past. Shantanu stands where you saw him yesterday, kingly posture, helpless eyes, watching the woman who is not quite a woman. Ganga's bangles are quiet. Her hair is dark as whetstone. and in her arms is a newborn who barely had time to cry. Shantanu reaches without thinking. He is a father already before he understands what that word is going to cost him. Ganga doesn't fight him. She lets him touch the child's forehead. Then she turns, as calm as a current, and walks into the river. The water climbs her ankles, her calves, her knees, and Shantanu, king of a whole land, takes one stumbling step forward as if a crown can command a river. To stop, it cannot. You feel the movement in your chest, that sharp helplessness, like the first drop of rain before a storm. Ganga lowers the baby to the water. No flourish, no anger, just a simple, final motion. Then she lifts her empty arms and comes back to shore, wet silk clinging, eyes steady. Shantanu doesn't speak. He can't. His throat is full of questions he promised not to ask. So he swallows them like stones. Time moves the way the Ganga moves. Not in days, in seasons. The palace fills and empties with ceremony, drums, conch calls, garlands that wilt by evening. Each time, a child is born. Each time, Shantanu's face brightens like sunrise. Each time, Ganga carries the newborn to the river with the same unhurried steps. And each time, the water takes what it's given. You're not always there. No one can stand on a riverbank for years without needing food, without needing sleep. But the memory sticks to you like wet cloth. The scent of milk and sandalwood in the royal chambers, the hush before a baby's first cry, the soft slap of water against stone, and Shantanu's hands opening and closing at his sides, as if he can still grab something already gone. By the seventh time, even the palace servants walk more quietly. Even the lamps seem to burn lower. Even the peacocks in the gardens sound uneasy, their calls harsh in the heat. Shantanu grows thinner. His smile becomes a rare guest. He does not ask. He does not break the condition. He keeps his promise the way some men hold their breath. Too long, until it hurts, until their eyes sting, until they begin to see spots. Then the eighth child comes. The air is heavy with monsoon damp. Rain taps the palace roofs in quick, restless fingers. You can smell jasmine crushed by wet feet and the sharp sweetness of ghee lamps fighting the humidity. A newborn's cry rises, strong, offended, full of life. Shantanu laughs once, startled by his own hope. He reaches for the baby. He holds him longer than he should, pressing the tiny body to his chest like he can hide him there. Ganga watches. Her face is gentle, too gentle, and Shantanu suddenly understands, not with thought, but with a cold wave through his bones, where she is going. She takes the baby, she turns. She walks toward the river, and Shantanu breaks, not politely, not like a king, like a man whose heart has been sliced open 7 times already and refuses to be sliced an 8th. He runs. You see his feet slip on wet stone. You hear the clink of his ornaments, the scrape of his rings as he grabs her arm. His voice comes out raw and loud against the rain. He demands to know why. He begs, he accuses, and the moment his words hit the air, the world seems to pause, as if even the Ganga is listening. Ganga stops. The rain slides down her cheeks like tears she doesn't need. She looks at Shantanu with something that could almost be pity. And then she tells him, not in a long debate, not in a dozen clever reasons. She simply reveals what has been hidden under the surface all along. Those 7 children were not ordinary. They were radiant beings bound to a human ending by a curse that had to be burned away quickly. The river took them because the river could carry them back, because she could do it gently, because it was mercy, even if it looked like cruelty from the shore. This eighth child is different. His curse is longer. His time on earth is required. And now that Shantanu has broken the condition, the marriage cannot hold. Ganga will leave, but she will not leave empty-handed. She will take the boy. She will raise him where his true teachers are waiting. And one day, when the time is right, she will return him. You stand there in the rain and feel the strange shape of it. A promise kept too long, a promise broken too late, and a child, warm, breathing, squirming, who is the only one allowed to stay. Only not here, not yet. Ganga slips from Shantanu's grasp as easily as water through fingers. She steps into the river, and the river opens for her like a doorway. The last thing you see is the baby's small hand, waving once in the rain, by accident. Then the surface closes. Shantanu stands on the bank, soaked and shaking. His arms are empty. His breath fogs in the damp air, and the palace behind him suddenly feels like a place with too many rooms, too much silence. Years pass. Shantanu rules because a king must. He sits in council with ministers who smell of ink and old cloth. He rides out to inspect fields where farmers bend like commas in the heat. He attends sacrifices where the air is thick with smoke and sweet offerings. Priests chant until the sound becomes a steady river of its own. But at night, when the palace cools and the stone floors hold the day's last warmth, he listens for footsteps that never come. You see him alone, lamp burning low, fingers idly turning a ring. A man who has everything except the one small weight that should have been in his arms. And far away, far above the dust and politics, Devavrata grows, not in a nursery, not with palace toys and silk rattles. He grows with the sound of rushing water and voices that do not belong to humans. Sometimes it is the roar of a waterfall in the mountains, cold spray on his face. Sometimes it is the hush of a moonlit lake where lotuses glow faintly, as if holding starlight in their petals. Sometimes it is the deep, steady chant of beings who speak like thunder, softened into words. You're beside him now. You can feel the air change. It's cleaner than any air you've breathed. It smells like rain before it falls, and like flowers you can't name. Ganga is there, always, not hovering, not fussing, just present, like the horizon. She teaches him to stand still, to listen, to feel the pull of currents, not only in water, but in people. A child raised by a river learns quickly. Force is real, but timing is everything. Devavrata is not lonely. He has company, those bright, cursed beings who were his brothers in another way. They are not infants now. They are guardians, teachers, older than old friends, with eyes like polished stone and laughter that crackles. They show him how to move without disturbing leaves, how to breathe without panic in deep water, how to hold his mind steady when the world turns loud. And yes, sometimes they tease him. A boy who is half royal and half divine is still a boy. If he slips on wet rocks, someone will remember it for weeks. If he tries to look dignified while a fish bumps his leg, someone will laugh. Even celestial beings, it turns out, appreciate a good splash. His education is not gentle, not always. One day you're walking with him through a forest where the trees are tall and silver-barked and the ground is springy with moss. The next day, you're on a wind-cut cliff, watching him hold a longbow that feels too large for any child. It hums faintly, the string taut as a held breath. His fingers blister, then harden. His arms tremble, then steady. He learns to shoot until the arrow's flight feels like an extension of thought. He learns to ride until horse and rider feel like one shadow. He learns the names of weapons, but more than that, he learns their temperament. Some are eager, hungry to be used. Some are proud and stubborn, refusing a careless hand. Some are so quiet, they scare you more than the loud ones. The strangest lessons come at night. The sky is enormous, jeweled with stars. The air is cool enough to raise goosebumps on your arms. Devavrata sits beside a fire that burns blue at the edges, and sages speak to him about duty. Not as a lecture, as a living thing. They tell him a king is not a man who takes. A king is a man who holds. He holds his people the way the earth holds seed. He holds his anger the way a dam holds floodwater. He holds his word the way a traveler holds the last sip of water on a hot road, carefully, reverently, knowing it will matter. Devavrata listens. He doesn't always understand, but he remembers, and that is the secret gift of his childhood. He remembers everything. Then comes the day the training turns sharp. Parashurama arrives like a storm that has decided to take human shape. You feel it before you see him. The air tightens, birds fall silent. Even the leaves seem to hesitate in their rustling. He is a warrior sage, eyes bright, presence heavy, as if the ground itself pays attention when he steps. Devavrata stands straighter the moment he appears, not from fear exactly, but from recognition. This is someone who knows what weapons truly cost. Parashurama does not coddle. He doesn't praise easily. He sets Devavrata tasks that make your mouth go dry just watching. Hold this stance until your legs forget they can shake. Draw the longbow again and again until your shoulders burn like coals. Strike a target you can barely see, in wind that wants to steal your breath. And when Devavrata succeeds, Parashurama simply gives him another challenge, as if excellence is the entry fee, not the prize. There are moments of almost ridiculous seriousness. At one point, Devavrata stands drenched in sweat, hair stuck to his forehead, trying not to blink. A small insect lands on his nose. It takes its time. It strolls. It pauses. Devavrata's eyes cross slightly as he tries to stare past it without moving. You can feel your own face wanting to twitch. Parashurama watches like a mountain watching a river. Devavrata does not flinch. The insect eventually leaves, unimpressed by greatness. Even Parashurama's mouth twitches once, the smallest hint of amusement. Then the lesson continues. Weapons are taught. Yes, but so is restraint. Parashurama makes Devavrata practice stopping. Stopping mid-strike, stopping mid-charge, stopping when victory is close enough to taste. It's harder than attacking. It makes Devavrata's jaw clench, his hands shake with the effort of holding back. A warrior's body loves motion. A warrior's pride loves completion. But Parashurama is shaping something else in him. A blade with a sheath, a fire with a hearth. Ganga watches all of it. Sometimes she speaks quietly to her son when the day's training ends. Her hand smooths his hair the way any mother might, even if her fingers smell faintly of river water and lotus. Devavrata's face softens when she touches him. He has tenderness in him, and it isn't a weakness. It's a chosen thing. You see it in small moments, when he lifts a wounded bird and sets it gently in a safer nest. When he shares his water with a tired traveler without being asked. When he listens to an old sage ramble, nodding patiently, even though Devavrata already knows where the story is going. He could become arrogant. How could he not? Raised by a goddess, trained by beings who don't age like humans, taught by Parashurama himself. But he doesn't. There's a quietness in him that feels like deep water. And yet, beneath that quiet, there is weight, because he is the eighth. He is the one who remained when 7 were taken. That kind of survival sits on a person. It becomes a second spine. Some evenings, when the sky is purple and the air smells like wet stone, you find Devavrata alone by the water's edge. He watches the current with a look that isn't quite sadness, isn't quite peace. He is thinking of brothers he never played with in a palace courtyard. He's thinking of a father whose arms have been empty for years. He doesn't say it aloud. He doesn't need to. You feel it anyway. Then the day comes when the world shifts again. There's a restlessness in the air, like the moment before birds migrate. Ganga stands with Devavrata on a bank that feels more familiar, more human. The water is the same water, but the smells are heavier now. Smoke from distant cooking fires, damp earth, the faint sourness of sweat and cattle. Far off, you can hear village sounds, a dog barking, a child laughing, a cart creaking. Ganga looks at her son the way the sky looks at the earth, vast, loving, unwilling to admit it must let go. She tells him it's time. Devavrata's throat tightens, not with fear, with something worse, hope, because hope always risks disappointment. He steps into the water with her. The river closes around his legs, cool and steady. It rises to his waist, his chest, his shoulders. For a breath, you feel suspended too, as if the world is holding still. Then the river carries them, not downstream like driftwood, through, as if the Ganga has hidden corridors inside herself, doorways beneath the surface. Light changes, sound changes, and then, just like that, you are back at the familiar bend near Hastinapura. The same stones, the same reeds, the same muddy scent. But the boy who rises from the river is not a boy anymore. He's a young man, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes steady as if they've watched storms from above. Water streams down his hair and lashes. He stands dripping on the bank like a miracle that has decided to be practical. He wears simple cloth, but it hangs on him like royal fabric would on lesser men. Ganga steps beside him, and for a moment, the river seems to brighten, as if recognizing its own. You're standing there with them. Your feet are on the damp earth. Your skin feels the cool mist rising off the water, and you hear it, shouts from the palace guards, the clang of weapons being lifted in alarm. Hastinapura has learned to expect many things. A goddess returning a son from a river is not one of them. Men run, orders fly. Someone nearly trips over their own spear. A messenger sprints toward the palace, sandals slapping stone, breath coming in panicked bursts. Shantanu arrives with his retinue like a storm, finally given permission to break. He rides hard. His horse is flecked with foam. His eyes are wild, refusing to believe, and terrified to believe. He dismounts before the horse even stops properly, stumbling forward like a man who forgot how to be king. And then he sees him, Devavrata, standing there, alive, grown, beautiful in that severe, unornamented way that makes people go quiet. Shantanu's face changes in a single breath. All the years collapse, all the lonely nights, all the swallowed questions, all the empty cradles. They collapse into one expression. He reaches for Devavrata, as if afraid his arms will close on air. Devavrata steps forward and bows, low and formal, the way a prince should. Then Shantanu breaks that formality with the desperation of love. He pulls his son up and holds him. You hear Shantanu's breath catch, a sound too raw for court. His shoulders shake. The king weeps, not a tidy, dignified tear. He weeps like the river finally returned what it stole. Devavrata stays still in his father's arms. His hands lift slowly, uncertain for a heartbeat, then settle on Shantanu's back. It's a simple touch, but it lands like a vow. Ganga watches them with an expression that is both soft and far away. She has given what she promised. She has done what the curse demanded. Now her part in this stretch of the world is ending. She doesn't linger for long. Rivers don't. She steps backward toward the water, her feet barely disturbing the surface. Before she goes, she looks at Devavrata one last time. Her eyes say what words don't need to say. Remember what you are. Remember what you were made to carry. Then she is gone, folding into the river as easily as breath into air. The palace welcomes Devavrata like a festival. Trumpets, conches, drums that thump in your ribs, garlands thrown so thick they look like bright ropes in the air. The smell is overwhelming. Marigold, incense, ghee, sweat, crushed petals underfoot. You walk through the gates with the crowd pressing in, and you feel the heat of bodies, the excitement rising like smoke. Everyone wants to see him, the river-born prince, the one who returned, the one with the calm eyes. Devavrata doesn't bask. He moves through it all with a kind of careful grace. He touches elders' feet. He offers respect to teachers. He accepts blessings with a lowered gaze. But you notice something. He keeps glancing, almost unconsciously, toward Shantanu, as if checking that his father is still there, as if part of him still expects to wake up and find the palace was a dream. Shantanu, for his part, cannot stop looking at his son. It's almost funny, in a tender way. This great king, who can judge disputes and command armies, keeps staring like a man who thinks, if he looks away, the miracle will return to the river. At one point, during a formal assembly, Shantanu tries to act regal. He tries to speak about matters of state, but his eyes slide back to Devavrata, sitting straight as a spear beside the throne, and Shantanu's voice falters. A minister clears his throat loudly, pretending it's about dust in the hall. Someone else suddenly finds their scroll fascinating. Everyone politely ignores the king's distraction, because everyone understands. A man can rule a kingdom, but he cannot rule his heart. Days pass into weeks. Devavrata begins to take his place in the rhythm of the court. He listens to petitions. He rides out with the king. He learns the names of villages, rivers, borders, harvest cycles, the practical weight of land. He trains with soldiers in the practice yards where the dust rises in pale clouds and sticks to sweat. His arrows find their targets with quiet certainty. His sword hand is steady. His body moves like it remembers lessons learned in places most men will never see. And still, he is gentle when gentleness is needed. He speaks to stable boys without crushing them with his presence. He thanks servants who bring water. He pauses to watch the Ganga sometimes, standing at a balcony where the breeze carries the river's scent up into the palace. You stand there too, in that warm wind, hearing the distant sound of water and city life braided together. For a moment, it feels like peace has finally chosen this family, like the river took its price and is satisfied, like Shantanu's grief has reached its end. But life doesn't stop moving just because one wound has closed. One afternoon, Shantanu walks into the forest to hunt, as he always has. The sun is bright. The air is hot enough to make the leaves droop, and then, cutting through the smells of dust and deer and warm bark, something impossible reaches him. a sweetness, a fragrance, like flowers that shouldn't exist in any season. Shantanu slows, head turning like a man bewitched. You feel the pull, too, even from here, even before you see its source. Devavrata, back at the palace, senses something shift, not a voice, not an omen, just the faint tightening of fate, like a bowstring drawn very slightly. He looks toward the river, toward the forest beyond, toward whatever is coming next, and the Ganga keeps flowing, silent, patient, as if it already knows the name of the fisherman's daughter waiting downstream. The sun is higher now, and the heat has teeth. It presses down on the forest like a warm, heavy hand. Leaves hang tired on their branches. Even the birds sound like they're speaking through sleep. Shantanu should be thinking of deer tracks and wind direction, of the clean, sharp focus that hunting brings. Instead, he stops, because the smell changes. You catch it too, standing a few steps behind him among the dry ferns and thorny shrubs. At first, you think it's some hidden grove of champa flowers. Then you realize it's sweeter than champa, softer than jasmine. It doesn't belong to any season, you know. It's the kind of fragrance that makes you forget you were thirsty. The king's hand lowers from his longbow. His head tilts slightly, like a man hearing music no one else can hear. And then his feet begin to move. Not quickly, not with the purpose of a hunter, more like someone walking in a dream, pulled by a thread tied around the heart. Dry twigs snap under sandal soles. Dust puffs up and clings to sweat. The forest thins, opening toward water, and the air grows cooler by degrees. You hear it before you see it, the steady, unhurried voice of the river. The Ganga. She's wide here, sunlight flashing on her skin like scattered coins. The bank is busy in the way riverbanks always are. Washermen slap cloth against stones. A line of women balances brass pots on their hips. Fishermen sit mending nets, their fingers moving fast as spiders. And there, moving between boat and shore with practiced ease, is a young woman. She isn't dressed like a princess. No silk, no gold. Just simple cloth tied securely, so it won't betray her when she steps into the water. The river laps at her ankles as she steadies the boat. Her hands are strong, not rough exactly, just honest, and the fragrance is hers. It trails behind her like a blessing that got lost and decided to stay. You watch Shantanu try to stand like a king. He has faced armies, tigers, and arguments in his court that could turn a man's hair white. Right now, he looks like any man who has been struck cleanly, right through pride and sense. He approaches the boat. He says something, gentle, careful. He asks who she is and where she comes from, and why the river seems to lean closer when she steps near. She answers with her eyes lowered, respectful, not playing games. Her name is Satyavati. She is the daughter of the fisherman chief who rules these boats and nets like a small kingdom. And she works here, carrying people across. The king listens as if every syllable is precious. He should leave. You can feel it, how the moment is balanced on a knife edge. But the fragrance keeps wrapping around him. It clings to his breath. It slips into his thoughts like warm milk into tea. And when Satyavati pushes the boat off and pulls into the current, the king stands on the bank and watches as though she's carrying away something of his. A fisherman calls out about fares. A child laughs, splashing the shallows. The world keeps doing what it does, but Shantanu's gaze follows that boat until it becomes a dark speck against glittering water. When he finally turns back toward the forest, he walks as if his bones have softened. The hunt is forgotten, the sun keeps blazing, and the sweetness stays with him, stubborn as a memory. Back at the palace, the air smells of sandalwood and polished stone. Servants move quietly across cool floors. Courtiers bow and murmur greetings. Everything is orderly. Everything is familiar. And Shantanu sits on his throne like a man wearing someone else's clothes. He tries. He truly tries. He listens to petitions. He nods at the right moments. He says the proper kingly things, and the ministers pretend not to notice the way his mind keeps drifting downstream. But his eyes keep losing focus. His fingers tap the armrest in an impatient rhythm. When a servant brings him food, he lifts a morsel, pauses, and sets it back down. The king who used to eat like a man, who had earned his hunger, now eats like someone doing a chore. At night, in his chambers, lamps flicker in niches along the walls. The breeze smells faintly of the river, if you lean close to the window. Shantanu leans close. He stares out into darkness, as if he might see that little boat gliding toward him on moonlit water. He doesn't sleep well. He wakes and lies still, eyes open, listening to the palace breathe. And when morning comes, he looks older than he did the day before. It doesn't take long for the palace to notice. Palaces notice everything. They notice when a queen changes her hairstyle. They notice when a guard is suddenly replaced. They notice when the king stops eating. The servants whisper in corners. The cooks, insulted on behalf of their spices, begin taking it personally. A minister suggests a special tonic. Another recommends music. A third suggests that the king simply take his mind elsewhere. He says it with the bright confidence of a man who has never been in love. Yes, of course. What a brilliant plan. Just take your mind elsewhere. Devavrata notices without anyone telling him. He has that way about him. A small change in breath, a shadow behind someone's eyes, and he feels it like a shift in wind before rain. You see him in the court, standing near the throne. Tall, calm, the kind of presence that makes loud men lower their voices without knowing why. He watches his father lift food, pause, and set it down again. He watches Shantanu listen to a report and then ask a question that makes no sense because his mind is in another place. Devavrata says nothing in public. He waits until the court empties, until the pillars stop echoing, until even the parrots in the garden sound drowsy. Then he follows his father to a quieter hall. The floors here are cool marble. The air is dim, scented with old incense, and fresh flowers placed for the household gods. And Devavrata, who can face war without blinking, approaches this softer danger with careful steps. He asks his father what is wrong. He asks in the way a son asks when he already knows something is wrong, and he will not be comforted by lies. Shantanu tries to wave it away. He tries to smile. He tries to be a king and not a man caught in longing. But his eyes betray him. The grief of Ganga had once hollowed him. Now something else is doing it. Something warm and alive and humiliating. Finally, the king admits it. Not with dramatic speeches, just with the weary honesty of a man who is tired of carrying his own secret. He tells Devavrata about the riverbank, about Satyavati, about the fragrance that doesn't belong to any flower he knows, about the way his heart, traitorous and youthful, has decided to begin again. And he tells him the other part too. Because Shantanu did not only look, he went. He spoke to her father, the fisherman chief. He asked for her hand. And the Fisherman chief listened, respectful, calculating, unmoved by royal titles, the way river people often are. Then he named his price. Satyavati's sons must inherit the throne, not Devavrata, not the line that already stands tall and crowned in everyone's imagination. Her sons. The fisherman chief said it simply, as if he were asking for the proper fee for crossing water. And Shantanu, who could command armies, could not command this, because it wasn't a matter of force. It was a matter of what a father wants for his daughter, a matter of futures, a matter of the way men with boats understand leverage. Shantanu refused. He left. He came back to his palace and sat with the desire that had nowhere to go. That is why he doesn't eat. That is why he looks older each morning. When Devavrata hears it, something stills inside him. You can almost feel it, like the hush that falls over a river when a big cloud passes over the sun. He stands very straight. His face doesn't twist with anger. He doesn't accuse his father. He doesn't laugh. He just becomes quiet in a way that makes you uneasy, because you've seen warriors get quiet right before they do something irreversible. He bows to his father. He leaves the hall, and for a moment, the palace feels colder, though the day is still hot. Devavrata walks fast, not running, not like a man out of control, like a man who has chosen a direction and will not stop until he reaches the end of it. You follow him out through palace gates, where guards snap to attention. The city air hits you, spices, dust, sweating horses, frying sweets from a street stall. Somewhere a potter taps wet clay into shape. Somewhere a conch sounds from a shrine, long and low. Devavrata doesn't look left or right. He heads straight toward the river. The road is hard-packed earth. Heat rises off it in shimmering waves. By the time the riverbank comes into view, you can taste salt on your upper lip. The Ganga is brighter now, almost white, where the sunlight strikes. Boats bump gently against wood posts. Nets hang like curtains. And that fragrance, there it is again, too sweet to be real. It drifts across the water and finds Devavrata as if it has been waiting for him. He reaches the fisherman chief's dwelling. It isn't a palace. It's a solid, practical house near the bank, built for a life that smells like river mud and fish and wet rope. Men sit outside repairing gear. A few look up sharply when they see who approaches. Even if you've never seen Devavrata before, you know. His presence announces him. The fisherman chief comes out. He's older, broad-shouldered, with eyes that miss nothing. He bows with the measured respect of a man who honors kings without being owned by them. Devavrata speaks, not with threats, not with flattery. He asks for the truth, though he already has it. He asks what bargain was offered to his father. The fisherman chief repeats it. His daughter will not be given into a house where her children will always stand behind another man's son. He wants her line to sit on the throne. He wants certainty. Devavrata listens. Then he gives the fisherman something even rarer than certainty. He gives him a vow. Right there, on the riverbank, with boatmen and fishermen as witnesses, Devavrata makes his promise. He renounces his claim to the throne. He will not stand in the way of Satyavati's sons. And then, because men who understand power understand that promises can unravel, he goes further. He vows that he will never marry. He vows that he will never father children. No sons will rise later to challenge her sons. No grandson of Devavrata will appear like a shadow across their reign. It is total. It is clean. it is terrifying. You feel the air change when he says it, like the moment before lightning breaks. Even the river seems to pause, holding its breath against the bank. The fisherman chief is stunned. This is not what he expected. He expected arguments, maybe gifts, maybe veiled threats, the way royal men sometimes dress violence in politeness. He did not expect the crown prince to cut his own future away with his own words. For a moment, the fisherman chief hesitates, not because he doubts Devavrata, but because he knows the weight of what is being offered. Then he accepts. How could he not? His daughter's fate has been secured by a vow that sounds like it was forged out of iron. Satyavati herself is nearby. You glimpse her at the edge of the scene, half hidden behind a post, eyes lowered. She looks like someone listening to a river at night, quiet, alert, not fully understanding yet what kind of storm has just rolled in because of her. Devavrata turns away from the hut, and as he does, the world answers. A wind rises suddenly, cool against sweat. The sky seems to brighten, as if someone has lifted a veil. You hear a sound like distant drums, though no one is beating them. Then flowers begin to fall. Not a few blossoms carried on breeze. A shower, soft fragrant petals drifting down from nowhere, landing on Devavrata's shoulders, catching in his hair, floating on the river's surface like tiny boats. The fishermen stare upward, mouths parted. A child reaches out and grabs a handful, laughing because it feels like a festival has begun for no reason at all. Devavrata stands in the middle of it, unmoving, petals melting against his warm skin. This is the moment the gods notice. Not quietly, not politely. They notice like thunder. And somewhere behind you, someone breathes his new name into the air. Bhishma, the terrible one. Not terrible because he is cruel. Terrible because once his word has left his mouth, the world must rearrange itself around it. He walks back toward the palace. You walk with him. The road seems longer now, or maybe your mind keeps tripping over the vow, trying to understand its shape. The city smells sharper in the afternoon heat. Sweat, dust, fried lentils, cow dung drying in neat patties near doorways. Life going on, ordinary and busy, unaware that the future just snapped into place. Bhishma, Devavrata, doesn't slow. His expression is calm, but you can sense the cost humming under his ribs. It isn't regret. Not yet. It's something steadier. Like a man who has placed a heavy stone on his own chest and decided he will simply learn to breathe beneath it. At the palace gates, the guards straighten so quickly, it's almost comic. One of them nearly tangles his spear with another's, and they both freeze, pretending nothing happened. Bhishma passes them without a glance. He goes straight to Shantanu. The king is in a private chamber, away from ministers and messengers, sitting beside a low table where untouched food waits like a rejected offering. The air smells of ghee lamps and wilting garlands. Shantanu looks up, and for a heartbeat, you see hope flare, then fear, because fathers know their sons. Bhishma tells him what has been done. He tells him he has secured Satyavati's hand. He tells him the fisherman chief has agreed. And then he tells him the other part too. The renunciation, the vow, the cutting away of marriage and children, as calmly as one might describe removing armor after training. Shantanu's face changes. His lips part as if to speak, but no sound comes. He stands so abruptly, the chair scrapes the floor. You see his hands reach out, not like a king reaching for a servant, but like a man reaching for his son, as if afraid he might vanish. Shantanu's eyes fill. He has wept before, you remember. He He wept when Ganga left him. That weeping was wild and helpless, like an animal calling into the dark. This is different. This is the grief of love mixed with gratitude and horror. A father receiving a gift so great it feels like a wound. He gathers Bhishma close. The room smells of sandalwood and salt tears. Outside, somewhere in the palace courtyard, you hear peacocks calling. A servant hovers at the doorway, unsure whether to enter or flee, caught between duty and the awkwardness of witnessing a royal family's private heartbreak. Shantanu blesses his son, and then, because blessings are the only thing he has that can even try to match what Bhishma has sacrificed, Shantanu gives him something extraordinary. He grants him a boon. Bhishma will not be taken before his time. He will choose the moment he leaves this world. Not metaphorically, not poetically, truly. When the end comes close, Bhishma will be able to hold it back like a door held shut against a storm, or open it when he decides the time is right. The boon settles over him like a second skin. You can almost feel it in the air, an invisible crown placed on a head that has refused the visible one. News moves through the palace faster than any messenger. Servants whisper, guards murmur, ministers hear and go quiet, suddenly, polite in a way that suggests they are afraid of their own thoughts. A vow like that makes even clever men nervous, because clever men like loopholes. Bhishma has just built a wall with no door, and by evening, the riverbank bargain has reached Satyavati too. She is brought to the palace with the dignity of someone walking into a life that is too big for her feet. You see her arrive through long corridors where lamps flicker against carved walls. The marble underfoot is cool. The air smells of lotus and incense. Her simple clothes look almost out of place among silk curtains, but her posture is steady. She keeps her eyes lowered, respectful. Yet, when she lifts them briefly, you catch it, the same calm you saw by the river, the same quiet strength. The fragrance follows her. It fills the corridors, softening the palace's sharp edges. Shantanu meets her like a man trying not to look too eager. He fails. It is almost sweet in its way. He is a king, yes, but he is also just a man who has been lonely for a long time, and now the world has given him another chance. The marriage happens with all the proper rites. Fire crackles, priests chant, ghee hisses as it touches flame. Garlands are exchanged. The air grows thick with flower scent and smoke. Somewhere outside, drums beat in a slow, celebratory rhythm that you feel in your chest. And Bhishma stands close by, as he should, a son watching his father begin again. His face is composed, but if you look closely, you see the smallest tightening at the corner of his jaw. Not anger, not sorrow, more like the muscles of a man holding a heavy load very still. Satyavati becomes queen. The palace shifts around her, adjusting like fabric settling over a new form. Servants learn her preferences. Cooks ask what flavors she likes. Ministers bow a fraction deeper because she is now a doorway to the king. And all the while, Bhishma remains exactly what his vow has made him: unmarried, unclaimed, a prince who will never be king, a protector who belongs to the throne, whoever sits on it. In the days that follow, Shantanu's appetite returns. It's almost embarrassing how quickly. He eats with the gusto of a man who has remembered what food is for. He laughs more. He walks through the gardens at dusk with Satyavati, pointing out flowers and trees like a boy showing off a toy he didn't expect to own. Once, You see him trip slightly on the edge of a stone path because he was watching her instead of his feet. A servant looks away very quickly, pretending to admire the sky. Bhishma watches too. If he feels anything sharp, he swallows it. His father is happy. That is what he wanted. That is what he bought with his own future. The river keeps flowing. The same Ganga who took a price from Shantanu once already now glides past the palace walls, smooth and indifferent as polished stone. At night, when lamps burn low, you can hear her faintly if you stand near an open window. You stand there sometimes, feeling the cooler air on your face. You smell wet earth. You hear distant frogs. Somewhere, a boat creaks against its rope, and in the inner chambers of the palace, a new life begins to grow. Satyavati bears Shantanu a son, Chitrangada, a baby with tiny fists and a furious little voice. The palace celebrates. Gifts pile up like small mountains. Cloth, gold, honey, toys carved from sandalwood. Shantanu glows with pride. Satyavati looks tired and radiant in the way mothers do, hair loose, eyes half-lidded. Bhishma holds the child once, just once, in your sight. His hands are careful. He supports the head properly, because he is the kind of man who can learn any skill, even the gentle ones. The baby grabs his finger with surprising strength. Bhishma looks down, and something passes through his expression so quickly you almost miss it. A flicker, a shadow, then calm again. The child grows. Time does what it does. Chitrangada becomes a young man, handsome and bold, with too much confidence and too little patience. He rides horses hard. He trains until sweat darkens his clothes. He laughs loudly, as if daring the world to challenge him. And the world does. A Gandharva appears, bright as a blade, proud as a storm. Another Chitrangada, another man with the same name, as if fate has decided to make a cruel joke. They clash, not with armies, with pride, with the stubbornness of youth. The duel takes place away from the palace, beyond your sight. But the news returns like a cold wind. Shantanu's sun falls. The celebration garlands are taken down. The lamps burn low again. Satyavati's face turns inward, the way a river turns dark when clouds cover the moon. And Shantanu looks at Bhishma with an expression that holds both gratitude and fear. Because there is still another son. Vichitravirya, young, delicate, not built like Chitrangada, not loud, more like a sapling that grew too fast and hasn't hardened yet. Shantanu worries. You see it in how he watches the boy train, in how he questions physicians about herbs and tonics, in how he asks Bhishma to stand a little closer, as if Bhishma's very presence can keep misfortune away. Bhishma does stand closer. He becomes the boy's shield in hallways and courtyards, in councils and ceremonies, always there, always steady. And Shantanu, though his laughter returned for a while, begins to look tired again. Not from longing now, from age, from the weight of years and kingship and joys that keep turning into losses. One evening, you find Bhishma in the palace garden. The air is cooler. Night-blooming jasmine has opened, sweet and thick. A ghee lamp burns near a small shrine, its flame bending in the breeze. Bhishma stands with his hands clasped behind his back, looking toward the river's direction, even though you cannot see it from here. You can tell he is listening, not for sounds, for the shape of things to come. His vow has already begun to work on the world like an unseen hand. It has brought Satyavati into this palace. It has changed the line of inheritance. It has tied Bhishma forever to a throne that will outlast Shantanu. And now, with Chitrangada gone and Vichitravirya, too young to carry a kingdom alone, the future leans heavily on one quiet fact. Satyavati's son will need a bride, not someday, soon. A kingdom needs heirs the way a river needs banks. Without them, everything spreads and floods and becomes chaos. Bhishma turns from the garden. He starts walking back toward the inner halls. You fall into step beside him. The marble beneath your feet is cool now. The palace smells of extinguished lamps and sleeping flowers. And somewhere, far beyond these walls, in a city called Kashi, 3 princesses are growing up under the watch of a king who believes his daughter's marriage will be a grand festival. For now, the night is quiet. For now, the river keeps flowing. But Bhishma's footsteps echo down the corridor like distant hooves, steady, certain, and headed, inevitably, toward a chariot ride that will shake the world. The vow was supposed to solve everything. Instead, it created a new problem. Who would continue the line if Bhishma couldn't? Days pass in Hastinapura with the strange calm of a household that has stopped laughing too loudly. You feel it in the way servants move with softer footsteps, in the way elders clear their throats before speaking, in the way Satyavati's eyes rest too long on the empty spaces where Chitrangada should have been. Vichitravirya is there, yes, but he is not a boy who fills doorways with confidence. He is slender, thoughtful, quick to tire. When he walks through the halls, the sound of his sandals is small against the stone. And the palace, for all its carved pillars and cooling fountains, feels too big for him. At night, when the lamps are lowered, you smell the smoke of wick and sesame oil clinging to curtains. Outside, the air is warm, heavy, and alive with crickets. Inside, the future presses itself into every corner. A kingdom needs heirs the way fire needs fuel. Without them, even a mighty blaze becomes ash. Satyavati does not beg. She never has. She simply looks at Bhishma with that steady, river-deep gaze, and you understand without anyone saying a thing. This line must continue, not with Bhishma, with her son. So, Bhishma does what he always does. He takes the problem into his hands and turns it into a road. He calls for his chariot, and the palace, which had been holding its breath, exhales into motion. You're there when the stable doors swing open. The smell hits you first, hay warmed by sun, horse sweat, leather, and the sharp tang of rubbed oil. Grooms move quickly, braid in manes, checking straps, tightening buckles. A conch sounds somewhere in the distance, not for worship, but for readiness. Bhishma steps into the courtyard. He wears no crown. He doesn't need one. His armor catches the morning light like a quiet warning. The horses stamp, eager and offended at the delay. If horses could speak, these would complain loudly about being kept waiting for destiny. You climb up behind him. The wood of the chariot is smooth under your palm, polished by use. The reins feel alive even before they're lifted. And when Bhishma clicks his tongue and the wheels begin to roll, the whole city seems to turn its head and watch him go. Hastinapura falls behind in dust and sunlight. The road opens, and somewhere far away, in Kashi, a king is preparing a festival. Kashi is not a small place. Even thinking its name feels like tasting something rich. It sits by the river, like a jewel set into the earth. Temples, ghats, tall houses with painted balconies. A city where bells ring without anyone needing to explain why. A city where sandalwood smoke curls through air that already smells of flowers. And in that city, the king of Kashi has daughters. 3. Amba, the eldest, with a gaze that holds steady. Ambika, softer, watchful. Ambalika, youngest, quick as a sparrow's glance. Their father has done what fathers of kings do. He has invited the world, a Swayamvara, a choosing, an arena dressed up as romance. The road to Kashi takes time. You feel the heat shift as days pass. Some afternoons, the sun presses down like a hand on the back of your neck. Some mornings, the air is kind, cool with a hint of river mist. You pass groves where mango leaves shine like wax. You pass villages where smoke rises from cooking fires, and the scent of lentils and ghee trails after you like a blessing. Children run alongside the chariot for a little while, laughing, then peel away as the horses pull ahead. At night, when you stop, the stars look close enough to snag on a spear tip. Bhishma barely eats, not because he's trying to look heroic, because his mind is already in Kashi. You sit near the edge of the firelight, listening to the soft crackle of twigs. Somewhere in the dark, a jackal calls. The horses snort and shift, their bodies warm and solid when you brush past them. And Bhishma sits with his longbow across his knees, like it belongs there more naturally than sleep. You're traveling with a man who keeps promises the way others keep breath. Effortless, constant, and that's the frightening part. By the time the first towers of Kashi appear, the air has changed. It's thicker, sweeter, a city smell, jasmine, sweat, incense, river mud, and the metallic scent of crowds. You hear it before you see it fully. Music, drums, 100 voices rising and falling like a single animal breathing. The Swayamvara is underway. And Bhishma does not slow down. If anything, the horses seem to understand. They lift their heads. They pull like they're proud of the trouble they're about to cause. You can feel it. This is not a visit. This is an interruption. The road turns, and suddenly you're close enough to see banners, bright cloth snapping in the breeze, red, yellow, indigo, colors loud enough to make the sunlight jealous. The entrance to the royal grounds is crowded with guards, guests, merchants, and the curious. You smell roasted grains and sugar, garlands crushed underfoot, and the sharp sting of fresh-cut marigolds. Somewhere, a priest's chant hums like a bee in the background, and then Bhishma drives straight in. No announcement, no waiting, no polite clearing of throats, just wheels on stone and a chariot cutting into the heart of someone else's celebration. You're right there with him, jolted by the sudden shift from open road to packed ground. People leap aside. A man drops a tray of sweets and looks like the gods themselves have betrayed him. A drummer misses a beat. For a moment, the entire festival becomes a single stunned blink. Bhishma rises in the chariot, tall and unmoving. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. His presence is its own trumpet. He makes it known, without flourish, without apology, that he has come for brides for Vichitravirya of Hastinapura. The words land like a stone dropped into a pond. Ripples, silence, then outrage. Kings had come from far places, each of them thinking today might end with a wedding and a new alliance. Now they stand with their pride in their hands, suddenly unsure what to do with it. And the king of Kashi, who had dressed his daughters in the finest silk, who had planned a day where his house would shine, feels the insult like heat in his throat. You can see it in the way his shoulders stiffen, in the way his jaw locks. He does not want to yield. Not here, not in front of everyone. But Bhishma has already decided. He moves like a storm that does not ask permission from trees. The three princesses are brought forward, whether by command, by confusion, or by sheer momentum. It happens quickly. You see them clearly now. Amba's eyes flash not with fear, but with something sharper. Ambika's breath catches. Her fingers grip her scarf too tightly. Ambalika looks as if she might vanish into the folds of her own silk if she could. Their jewelry glints, heavy gold resting against their collarbones. Garlands brush their shoulders, fragrant and crushed from too many hands adjusting them. And before the world can find a new rhythm, Bhishma sweeps them into the chariot. It happens with stunning speed. One moment, they are standing under the canopy of the Swayamvara. The next, they are gathered close, silk and scent, and startled breath filling the space beside you. The horses surge forward. Wheels bite into stone. The festival shatters behind you into shouting and clanging armor. You're in the chariot with Bhishma as Kashi erupts. You feel the princesses' fear like heat. You hear their bangles knock softly against one another as the chariot jolts. And then the first arrows hiss past. Not close enough to touch you, but close enough that the sound raises the hair on your arms. The kings of the Swayamvara are not men who came unarmed. They came expecting display, rivalry, and the sweet possibility of victory. Now they have something else, a chase, a rescue, a chance to prove they are not fools in their own retinues. Chariots pour out behind you like a river turning violent. You hear hooves hammering the ground. You hear men shouting commands, the snap of reins, the creak of wheels under strain. Dust rises, thick and dry, filling your mouth. The air tastes like sun-baked earth. Bhishma stands braced, one foot planted, the other steady. He lifts his longbow. There is no hurry in him, no panic, just a calm that makes the chaos look childish. He releases arrows in clean measured arcs, not wildly, not with rage, with precision. A standard falls, a chariot wheel splinters, a horse shies, suddenly unwilling to run into what feels like an invisible wall. The pursuit stumbles and bunches like a flock of startled birds. You feel a strange, guilty thrill, because it is terrifying, and it is magnificent. There is something intoxicating about being beside a man the world cannot stop. The princesses cling to the edges of the chariot. Ambika's breath comes fast. Ambalika's eyes are wide, reflecting dust and sun and the flash of weapons. Amba stares back at the oncoming kings with a look that says she is memorizing every face. The chase stretches out of the city, out into open land where the road runs straight and unforgiving. Heat shimmers above the ground. The horses' flanks darken with sweat. You smell leather warming and the sharp tang of effort. Bhishma's arrows continue, each one a calm sentence spoken into a screaming crowd. One by one, the pursuing chariots fall back. Some turn aside, their drivers choosing pride's survival over pride's funeral. Some halt, trapped by broken harness or fear. The kings are brave, but bravery doesn't matter much when you're trying to stop Bhishma. Eventually, the road quiets. The thunder of hooves behind you fades into distant, bitter echoes. The dust settles enough that you can see the horizon again. Only then does Bhishma lower his longbow. Only then does the chariot's speed ease from flight to travel. The wind cools the sweat on your skin. The world becomes wide again, and that is when you hear it, not a scream, not a sob, a voice steady enough to cut through the rattling wheels. Amba speaks. You turn your head and you see her sitting upright despite the bruising ride. Her hair has come loose from its careful braids. A few strands cling to her cheek. Her garland hangs crooked. but her eyes are clear. She tells Bhishma something he did not plan for. She tells him she had already chosen. Not publicly, not with a garland thrown in ceremony. In her heart, in her father's quiet negotiations, in the secret agreements that happened behind curtains, she belonged to Shalva, king of Sauba. She had set her mind on him, and Shalva had set his mind on her. Bhishma's face changes, just slightly. It's the smallest tightening around the eyes. The kind of shift you notice only because you're close enough to hear the princess's breathing. He asks for certainty, not because he doubts her, but because the world runs on exactness, and Amba gives it. She does not plead with tears. She doesn't collapse into hysterics. She simply insists again and again that she is not free to be taken as though she were a prize. The chariot rolls on. The wheels make a steady, almost soothing sound. And in that steady sound, Bhishma makes a decision. He will not force her. His vow has bound him to the throne, yes, but it has not erased the last remaining tenderness in him. He stops the chariot near a stand of trees. The shade smells green and damp, a relief after dust. Birds startle up as the horses stamp and settle. Bhishma tells Amba she may go. One brief sentence, and it is done. He even offers protection for her journey, because he is Bhishma and he cannot help himself. Amba climbs down. Her feet touch the earth. For a moment, she stands there, looking back at the chariot. You can feel the air between them, thick with what might have been gratitude and what is already becoming something else. Then she turns and walks away. Her silk brushes dry grass, her anklets make a soft, stubborn sound, and the chariot moves on with 2 princesses instead of 3. Ambika and Ambalika sit very still now. The exhilaration of the escape has drained from them. What remains is the heavy quiet of being carried toward a life they didn't choose. The road back to Hastinapura is long. The sun moves slowly across the sky, as if it's thinking. At night, when you stop, the air cools and fills with the scent of smoke and boiled rice. The princesses eat little. They speak even less. You can hear the river sometimes, far off, its constant murmur like a secret. Bhishma keeps his eyes forward, but you catch him once, staring into the fire as if it has begun to show him shapes, as if a single released thread has started to unravel something vast. Because Amba does not go gently into the fate that has been thrown at her. She goes to Shalva. Of course she does. Where else would a woman go when she has been set loose, with her honor bruised, and her future turned into a question? You see it, the road she takes, smaller than the one Bhishma travels, the way people stare when a princess walks without a full entourage, the way dust clings to her hem, the way hunger becomes a quiet companion. The city of Sauba appears at last, and her heart lifts, exhausted and stubborn. She is brought before Shalva, and she tells him everything. How Bhishma stormed the Swayamvara, how she was taken, how she was released when she spoke, how she has come now to him, because the promise between them should still mean something. Shalva listens, and then he does something that feels, from far away, almost unbelievable. He refuses her, not with cruelty in his voice, maybe, not with laughter, but with that cold, proud logic that men use when they are afraid of being seen as weak. He cannot accept what Bhishma has touched. He cannot accept a woman who has been carried away, even if she was returned. He cannot risk the whispers of other kings. His pride chooses safety over love. Amba leaves Sauba as she arrived, alone. But now she carries something heavier than exhaustion. She carries humiliation that sticks like burrs. And she turns back toward the one man who started this, Bhishma. You feel, even from a distance, how her thoughts would harden, how every step would hammer the same question into the earth. Why should she be ruined for something she never chose? Why should Bhishma ride away clean, honored, untouched by consequence? She returns to Hastinapura. She demands justice, not politely, not indirectly. She wants Bhishma to take responsibility. There are moments when you can imagine the palace holding its breath again, the scent of cooled ghee in lamps, the hush of hallways, the way servants pretend not to listen while listening with their whole bodies. Bhishma receives her, he hears her, and he tells her the truth that is both honorable and unbearable. He cannot marry, he cannot. His vow is iron. It does not bend for guilt. It does not bend for pity. It does not bend even for the ruin of an innocent woman. You see it in your mind, Amba's face, as she realizes this, that she has found the wall, not a wall made of stone, a wall made of words spoken long ago beside a fisherman's hut, a vow that reached forward in time like a hand and has now closed around her throat. Amba leaves again, and this time she is no longer searching for a husband. She is searching for a weapon. She goes to the one teacher Bhishma once served, Parashurama, the one whose anger is old as mountains, the one who knows the secrets of weapons the way a river knows its own depth. You can almost smell that hermitage as she arrives, earth damp from shade, leaves crushed underfoot, the sharp scent of bark and smoke, silence so deep you can hear your own blood rushing in your ears. Amba throws herself before him, not with delicate manners, but with raw need. She tells him what happened. She begs him to make Bhishma take her, or to punish him, or to break him. Parashurama listens, and something in him, old pride, old affection for Bhishma, old fury at injustice, stirs. He calls Bhishma, a summons that is not a request. Bhishma comes. Of course he does. He will not refuse his teacher, even when his teacher's anger is aimed like an arrow at his chest. You're standing under trees that barely move in the hot wind. The air tastes green and still. The ground is packed earth, cool underfoot. And two men face each other who have loved each other in the way warriors do. With respect, with discipline, with the unspoken understanding that admiration can still end in combat. Parashurama insists Bhishma must accept Amba. He frames it as a duty, a correction. Bhishma bows and refuses, not out of stubbornness, out of surrender to his own promise. The refusal lands like a slap. Parashurama's patience snaps, and then the world becomes a ring of tension. They fight, not like ordinary men, not like soldiers in a crowded field. This is something older, a duel under open sky, watched by hermits and wind, and whatever gods might pause to pay attention. You hear the twang of bowstrings. You smell dust kicked up with every shift of feet. You see arrows cross the air like bright thoughts. But even in the clash, there is restraint, a strange courtesy. Neither man is trying to turn the world into horror. They are trying to win. They are trying to make the other yield. Hours pass, then a day, then another. The sun rises and sets, and still they stand, sweat drying and forming again, eyes sharp, arms steady through sheer will. At one point, you almost want to laugh, not because it's funny, but because it's absurd in the way only the lives of great warriors can be absurd. You're a hermit, trying to meditate, while two legends rearrange the sky with arrows nearby. Even the birds must have flown off, muttering complaints. The fight goes on, and then, at last, it ends without a clean victory. Because how do you force a man like Bhishma to break his word? How do you force a man like Parashurama to admit he cannot? The air itself seems exhausted. Parashurama withdraws, not because he is weak, but because the world is not ready for what their clash could become. Amba watches it all. She watches her hope rise and fall like a flame in wind. And when it becomes clear that even Parashurama cannot bend Bhishma, something in her settles. Not peace, not acceptance, a decision colder than either. She leaves the hermitage. She goes into the forests, and she begins to do what only the truly desperate do. She begins to burn her life down to a single point. Tapas, austerity. You can feel the forest around her, the smell of wet leaves after a brief rain, the sting of insects in the dusk, the way the heat rises from stones even after sunset. She sleeps on hard ground. She eats little. She repeats her purpose until it becomes the only thing left of her. Day after day, season after season. Her hair grows wild. Her skin darkens under sun. Her eyes become bright, too bright, like a lamp that has no oil left but still refuses to go out. She goes from place to place, searching for a god who will listen. Some turn away. Some offer comfort that sounds like insult. Some promise and then vanish like mist. And Amba keeps walking. You're with her in the lonely stretches where the world feels too large. You feel the ache in your legs. You hear your own breath louder than birds. You taste the bitterness of roots chewed for survival. She reaches the banks of rivers where pilgrims bathe. She stands near temples where bells ring and incense thickens the air. She climbs hills where wind is sharper and the sky seems closer. Finally, she reaches a place where the air feels charged, where silence is not empty, but waiting. She calls out, not with the soft voice of a princess asking politely, with the voice of a person who has been denied every door. Shiva answers, not like a friendly neighbor, like a force, like the night sky noticing a single candle and deciding it matters. Amba pours out her grievance. She asks for one thing, not a husband, not a palace, not comfort. She wants Bhishma brought down. She wants the man who set this in motion to feel consequence. Shiva grants her what she asks, but not in the clean way the desperate imagine. He tells her she will become the cause of Bhishma's fall. Not now, not in this body, not in this lifetime, but she will be the hinge upon which his end swings. The words are like a seed dropped into earth. Amba accepts them. What else is there to do? She cannot return to a normal life. Normal life has been burned away, and so, in some lonely place, some say by a river, some say beneath trees that remember her name, Amba gives up her body, not with fear, with purpose. The forest takes her. The wind takes her. The world goes quiet around her for a moment, as if even it understands that something has been set into motion. Time moves, years, decades. In Hastinapura, Bhishma brings Ambika and Ambalika home. The weddings are done with proper rites, with priests chanting, with sacred fires and rice thrown in blessing. The palace smells of turmeric and ghee and flowers crushed under happy feet. Musicians play until their fingers ache. Servants carry sweet drinks and plates of food. People smile because a kingdom likes to pretend it is always safe. Vichitravirya receives his brides. He tries to look like a king. He tries, but the effort shows in his eyes, and Bhishma stands to one side, watching, as he always does. A man who arranged everything. A man who belongs to none of it. At night, when the celebrations fade, you find Bhishma alone again. The corridor is cool, the lamps are low, a faint smell of marigold lingers in the air, already turning stale. He rests his hand on a pillar, and for a moment he closes his eyes, not in sleep, in something closer to listening. Because even if he does not know every step Amba has taken, he knows enough. He knows he has harmed someone who did not deserve it. He knows he has tried in his way to fix it and failed. He knows his vow has made him immovable. And when you are immovable, the world does not stop. It simply breaks around you. There are nights when he dreams of a chariot leaving Kashi, of silk and dust, of a woman's steady voice cutting through the rattle of wheels. He wakes with the taste of that moment in his mouth, dry as road dust. He says nothing of it, because what could he say? In the daylight, he is Bhishma, the terrible one, the man who does not bend. But inside him, somewhere, a small understanding has taken root, that the road he chose has other travelers now, that somewhere out in the vast humming world, a woman's vow has answered his, and one day, far away, beyond weddings and coronations and the slow rotting of peace, those two vows will meet like flint striking stone. For now, the palace settles back into routine. Courtyards are swept, garlands are cleared away. The smell of celebration fades into ordinary incense and lamp smoke. And Bhishma returns to his place beside the throne, steady, certain, with the faintest shadow at his heels, a shadow shaped like a princess walking away through grass, a shadow that will one day ride onto a battlefield wearing a different name. And when that day comes, Bhishma will finally understand. Not metaphorically, not poetically. He will be looking straight at the consequence he set free on the road from Kashi. And so Bhishma stepped back from the throne. He would serve, not rule. He would protect, not possess. He had no idea what that would cost him. Years begin to move the way the Ganga moves, quiet on the surface, relentless underneath. In the palace, mornings still smell like ghee lamps and fresh-washed stone. Servants sweep peacock feathers across marble floors until they shine. Conchis still call the court to order, as if sound alone can hold a kingdom together. But you can feel it, even before anyone says it out loud, that the air has changed. You are standing in the great hall when the question of the crown finally arrives. It isn't shouted. It's handled like a delicate dish, passed from hand to hand, everyone afraid to be the one who drops it. Dhritarashtra sits on the royal seat, blind eyes lifted toward nothing. Beside him, Gandhari's bangles are still, her face steady. Bhishma stands like a pillar near the throne, his armor cool in the shade, his palms resting on the familiar weight of duty. Pandu is there too, pale, sharp-eyed, carrying himself with that quiet confidence that makes people forgive weakness they can see. The hall is thick with incense, sandalwood, and something sharper, like nerves. Even the pigeons in the rafters sound careful. Dhritarashtra is older, stronger in build, and the son of the elder queen. But his blindness sits in the center of the room, like a stone no one can step around. So the elders choose Pandu. No drum roll, no celebration that feels clean. Bhishma watches the decision settle onto the palace like dust. He sees Dhritarashtra's hands tighten on the edge of the seat. He sees Pandu bow, respectful, grateful, already burdened. And Bhishma stays exactly where he is, loyal to the throne, whichever man warms it, immovable. You can almost hear the vow inside him, like a taut string. It does not snap, it does not loosen, it only hums. Time moves. A king needs heirs. A dynasty needs sons, the way a field needs rain. Pandu marries Kunti first, and then Madri. The weddings are bright. Marigolds, oil lamps, the sweet smoke of offerings. Guests chew betel leaf until their lips shine red, and musicians play until their fingers ache. In those early days, the palace feels almost light again. Bhishma even allows himself small comforts. An evening breeze on the terrace, the quiet clink of his own anklets as he walks. But fate doesn't stay politely in the corner. One day, news comes from the forest. Pandu has gone hunting, and in a moment of heat and haste, he strikes down a sage who was not meant to be struck. The curse arrives like a sudden storm. If Pandu ever seeks pleasure with his wives again, the end will come for him in that very moment. You're in the corridor outside the council chamber when you hear it. Voices low, urgent, then suddenly quiet. The smell of lamp smoke seems to thicken, as if the palace itself is holding its breath. Pandu doesn't argue. He doesn't bargain. He simply steps away. The day he leaves for the forest, the sun is harsh and white. Chariot wheels grind over dry earth. Kunti and Madri ride with him, their veils pulled low, their jewelry too bright for a goodbye. Bhishma watches from the palace steps. He does not reach out. He does not stop them. A man who keeps vows doesn't chase people down roads. He watches them disappear, and behind Pandu, like a shadow that grows long at sunset, Dhritarashtra slowly becomes king. The palace adjusts. It always does. Dhritarashtra sits on the throne and listens to everything. Footsteps, whispers, the rustle of silk. He asks for reports. He asks for details. He asks and asks, as if knowing more will make his hands steadier. And then Gandhari's long pregnancy begins. It becomes a kind of legend while it is still happening. Months pass, then more months. Women in the palace begin to whisper the way they do when they are afraid to be overheard by the gods. Servants make little offerings at doorways. Midwives bring herbs that smell bitter and green. Bhishma hears all of it, and he says very little. When the birth finally comes, it does not come like other births. A hard mass, silence. Then the arrival of Vyasa, dark, wild-haired, smelling of river mud and smoke, as if he stepped straight out of an old spell. You don't forget the sight of those pots lined up with ghee, row after row, like a strange pantry for destiny. And one day, one astonishing day, the palace fills with infant cries. Not one or two, not 5, 100. It's chaos that even the most disciplined servants can't fully tame. Milk spills, cradles creak, nurses hurry through corridors like a fleet of small, determined ships, each carrying a wailing prince. This is what royal lineage sounds like in real life. It's a nursery that never sleeps. Duryodhana is born first. The moment he arrives, jackals howl outside the city walls. Donkeys bray at the wrong hour. Even the wind seems to flinch. Astrologers murmur, and their beads click faster than usual. They urge the king to abandon the child. Dhritarashtra refuses. Bhishma stands near the doorway, smelling the sharp tang of medicines and warm ghee, and he feels something cold pass through him. Not fear, recognition. Some beginnings arrive already carrying their ending. The princes grow. The palace becomes a place of running feet and and scraped knees, of wooden practice swords and shouted games. Duryodhana grows broad-shouldered and hungry-eyed, always watching who gets what, always noticing who is praised. His brothers follow him like a tide. Bhishma tries to be what he has always been, the steady mountain. He teaches them etiquette, warfare, the posture of princes. He corrects them with a look, rewards them with a nod. But the boy is not made of nods. He's made of wanting. Years pass again. And then, like a sudden fresh wind through a stale room, Kunti returns. Pandu is gone now. The end came for him in the forest, just as the curse promised. And Madri followed him into the fire, unwilling to remain in a world without him. Kunti arrives at the gates with 5 boys. 5. They look sunburnt and bright-eyed, dressed in simple cloth from forest life. Their hair is tied back, their limbs lean with the strength of climbing and running on uneven ground. The palace servants stare the way people stare at unexpected rain. Yudhishthira walks first, calm as a priest, even as a child. Bhima lumbers beside him, already built like a young bull, already grinning like the world is edible. Arjuna's gaze keeps moving, up to the roofline, out to the courtyard, as if measuring distances, even when he's simply walking. And Nakula and Sahadeva, the twins, move like reflections of each other, quiet and watchful. You're there when they enter the hall for the first time. You hear the soft slap of their bare feet on stone. You smell the dust of the forest still clinging to them, mixed with palace incense. Dhritarashtra welcomes them with words that sound generous. His voice is smooth, a king's voice. Bhishma watches him reach out to touch their faces, learning them by fingertips. And somewhere nearby, Duryodhana watches too, still, silent, as if he's looking at a guest who has arrived to take his seat at dinner. The boys begin to live together, cousins under one roof. At first, it seems almost possible. Children chase each other through courtyards. They splash at the edge of fountains. They wrestle and tumble in the dust until their mothers scold them and their nurses drag them off to be scrubbed. Bhima eats like a famine. More than once, a servant carrying a platter looks as if he's headed into battle. Duryodhana's brothers complain that the forest boy is swallowing their portions. Bhima, for his part, seems delighted by the outrage, as if it seasons the food. You see it start in small ways. A toy goes missing. A game turns rough. A joke becomes an insult that doesn't fade when the laughter does. Bhishma notices. He always notices. And he tells himself, it is childishness, that boys grow wild and then grow wise, that training will smooth their sharp corners. So he brings in Drona. The day Drona arrives, the air tastes of new beginnings, fresh cut grass in the practice yard, oil rubbed into bowstrings, the metallic smell of sharpened blades waiting to be used. Drona is stern and brilliant, the kind of man whose praise feels rarer than gold. He speaks of discipline the way other men speak of love. The princes line up before him in rows, 100 Kauravas, 5 Pandavas. In the early weeks, you can almost enjoy it. There's something soothing about repetition. Draw, hold, release. The thrum of bowstrings becomes a kind of music. Arrows slice the air in clean, satisfying lines. Arjuna becomes Drona's favorite. It happens gradually, like the sun sliding across the sky, so slow no one can argue with it, yet unmistakable once you see where the light has settled. Arjuna learns quickly, too quickly. Duryodhana watches him, jaw tight. Karna appears later in a public tournament, dazzling and sharp, But even then, the rivalry has already taken root. And Bhishma, standing in the shade of the practice yard, feels the old familiar tension in his chest. A family can be trained into greatness. It can also be trained into weapons. One day, the first truly ugly thing happens, not in public, not in court, in a quieter corner of the palace, where servants pretend not to see too much. Duryodhana offers Bhima sweet food. Too sweet, the kind of sweet that makes your teeth ache. Bhima eats it anyway, because Bhima eats everything anyway. He laughs, mouth full, claps Duryodhana on the shoulder, hard enough to make him stagger. Then Bhima's laughter slows. His eyes blink, heavy, and the world tilts. You're not the one holding him, but you see it. How fast strength can become weight. How quickly a mighty boy can turn into something limp and frightening. They drag him away. They hide him. They throw him into the river like a problem. The Ganga takes him. Water closes over his head, and the palace continues its day as if nothing has happened. That is the strangest part. The sun doesn't stop shining because a prince has been betrayed. But Bhima does not pass. He returns, dragged from the depths by strange hands, carried back by currents and fate and whatever unseen debts his life has collected. When he staggers into the palace again, blinking, furious, alive, the corridors smell suddenly colder. Kunti's face hardens into something you do not want to stand near. The Kauravas pretend astonishment, as if Bhima has simply wandered off and wandered back. Bhishma hears the murmurs. He sees the glances. He understands enough, and still, nothing truly changes. That is the slow torture of it, not the one sharp calamity, but the long damp rot of small cruelties left unpunished. Bhishma speaks. He warns. He presses Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra listens. Dhritarashtra sighs. Dhritarashtra returns, always, to the soft center of his love for his sons. And Bhishma stays where his vow placed him, beside the throne, protecting the crown, not cutting down the hands that reach for it. Years pass again. The princes become young men. Their shoulders broaden. Their voices deepen. Their rivalries stop looking like childhood and start looking like war with smaller weapons. Duryodhana gathers allies the way a fire gathers dry grass. Shakuni, his mother's brother, stays close, whispering cleverness into his ear. Dushasana follows like a shadow with fists. The Pandavas grow too, and it's hard not to see the difference. Yudhishthira carries himself as if truth is a physical thing he can hold. Bhima's temper is quick, but his affection is quick too. Arjuna is all focus, all aim, a man who can stare at a target until the world disappears around it. Nakula and Sahadeva remain quietly competent, like twin blades kept sharp without fuss. The court tries to pretend this is manageable. There are ceremonies, feasts. The tournament day arrives, bright and loud. The arena smells of trampled grass and sweat and flower garlands, crushed underfoot. Trumpets flare, people shout until their throats rasp. The princes display their skills. Arjuna's arrows land where they should, again and again, as if the air itself has agreed to help him. Duryodhana shows strength, maces swinging, dust rising in thick clouds. Then Karna arrives, radiant and furious, stepping into the arena like a man who has been denied a door and has decided to become a door himself. His skill is undeniable. But when his lineage is questioned, the moment tightens. Duryodhana's solution comes fast. He crowns Karna king of Anga right there, as if a kingdom is a gift you can toss across a room. The crowd roars. Karna's eyes shine. And you can feel another knot tie itself in the fate of this family. Two proud men recognize each other. Two men who feel overlooked decide they will never be overlooked again. Bhishma watches it, the way you watch a spark land in dry straw. Later, there is the question of succession. The princes are grown. The kingdom must know who will inherit. Dhritarashtra's love pulls one way, custom and merit pull another. In the end, the Pandavas, especially Yudhishthira, are too clearly suited for rule to deny. So Yudhishthira is named heir. It should settle things. It does not. Duryodhana's anger becomes a daily presence, like heat, not always visible, but always there. He and Shakuni and the others begin to plan. And now, the planning is not childish. Now it has architecture. The house of Lak is built. From the outside, it looks like a gift, a palace for the Pandavas in Varanavata, a place to rest, a place to celebrate. But inside the walls, the scent gives it away. If you've ever smelled resin melting near a flame, you know it. That sweet, sticky smell that clings to your nose. The smell of something meant to burn. Bhishma visits once, briefly. He walks through the halls, fingers brushing the walls as if touch could confirm what sight already knows. Luck, oils, dry timber, a house built like a lamp waiting for a wick. He confronts Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra pretends ignorance or convinces himself of it. It's hard to tell where his fear ends and his denial begins. Vidura, sharper and braver in speech than any of them, finds a way to warn the Pandavas, in riddles, in cautious hints, in words that slip past listening ears. And then the night comes. Fire moves faster than politics. Flames take the house. Smoke pours into the sky. People scream in the streets of Varanavata. In Hastinapura, the news arrives in the morning, carried by messengers whose mouths taste of ash. The palace becomes a place of mourning. Dhritarashtra weeps, not gently. Gandhari's cries cut through the women's quarters like a blade. Even Duryodhana performs grief with convincing skill. Bhishma stands at the edge of the mourning, and the incense smells wrong. Too sweet, too thick. He mourns too, because a man can mourn even when he suspects. And in the center of his mourning is a cold, helpless thought. If they are truly gone, it has happened under his watch. If they are not gone, then the fire is only the beginning. Time moves, as time always does, and then, like a ghost stepping into daylight, the Pandavas return. Alive, the court stares. Dhritarashtra's hands fly to their faces again, confirming what he cannot see. Kunti's breath leaves her in a long rush, as if she has been holding it for months. Duryodhana smiles. His smile is perfect. It is also unbearable. The Pandavas do not come back alone. They come back with Draupadi, a princess born of fire, eyes bright, posture unbending. When she walks into the court, the air seems to sharpen around her. Her marriage to all 5 brothers becomes another knot in the dynasty's already tangled rope. People whisper, people argue. Bhishma listens, jaw tight. In the end, the marriage is accepted, and with it comes the reality no one wants to say aloud. The Pandavas are too strong to simply erase. So Dhritarashtra divides the kingdom. It is presented as peace. It is actually a fence built between 2 animals that both remember the taste of rivalry. The Pandavas are sent to Kandavaprastha, a rough tract of land. Forest, dust, work. They transform it anyway. They build Indraprastha, and it rises like a dream, carved into stone. Gardens, halls, water that looks like floor, and floors that look like water. Maya, the strange architect spared in the burning of Kandava, fills the place with wonders that make visitors blink and laugh, and then blink again. You walk behind Bhishma when he visits, and the palace plays tricks even on careful eyes. A pond gleams like polished crystal. A corridor shines like a river. Servants smell of jasmine oil and fresh paint. The whole place hums with prosperity. It should be a triumph. But Duryodhana comes to see it too. And that is when the fire truly catches. He slips on an illusory floor and falls into water in full royal dress. His crown tilts, his hair slicks down, his pride takes the full splash. People laugh, some quickly cover their mouths, but the sound escapes anyway, like birds startled from trees. Draupadi laughs too, not gently. Duryodhana climbs out, dripping, eyes burning. You can almost feel the humiliation cling to him more than the water, like wet cloth in winter, heavy and impossible to ignore. He leaves Indraprastha carrying something that no servant can towel away. Envy. And envy is patient. It waits, it whispers, it looks for games that feel harmless. Soon, an invitation arrives for Yudhishthira, a friendly dice match, a family gathering, courtly entertainment. The messenger's voice is polite. The letter is perfumed, as if scent can soften the edges of what it contains. Bhishma reads it and feels his stomach tighten. Dice. Of all the weapons in a palace, dice are among the sharpest. They glitter, they roll, they smile. Yudhishthira is not foolish, not in the way most men are foolish. But he has a weakness that looks like virtue from a distance. He will not refuse a challenge. He will not step away once he has agreed. The day of the dice game arrives, and the hall is prepared like a festival. Silk banners hang from pillars. Oil lamps flicker against carved stone. The air is warm with bodies and incense, and under it all, the faint sourness of anxious sweat. Shakuni sits with the dice. His fingers are calm. His smile is small. Duryodhana watches from his seat, like a man listening for a door to unlock. Bhishma takes his place among the elders. You are there too, in the press of courtiers and princes, close enough to hear the dice strike the board. That sound, hard little clicks like rain on stone. At first, it's only wealth, gold, jewels, treasures brought from far kingdoms. Yudhishthira loses, and he smiles tightly as if luck is a passing cloud. Then he wagers more. Horses, elephants, servants. The stakes rise and the hall grows hotter. Even the lamps seem to burn brighter, as if eager to witness. Yudhishthira's face stays composed, but his eyes begin to look far away, like a man watching himself from across a river. He loses again and again. Somewhere in the hall, you hear a nervous laugh that dies immediately. Now it becomes a kingdom. Indraprastha itself, everything they built from forest and dust, gone on the toss of tiny cubes. Bhishma's fingers curl slightly against his palm. He can stop this. He knows he can. One word from him, one command, and the hall would fall silent. But the vow inside him tightens. Serve the throne, protect the crown, and the crown, today, belongs to Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra allows the game, so Bhishma stands in place, the way a man stands in rising floodwater, telling himself the current will pass. It does not pass. Yudhishthira begins to wager people. First his brothers, one by one, Bhima, Arjuna, Nakula, Sahadeva, each staked, each lost. The hall is so quiet now, you can hear silk sleeves brush against skin. You can hear someone swallow. Then Yudhishthira stakes himself and loses. A king becomes a slave in the space of a breath. It should end there. Any sane person would let it end there. But sanity has left the hall without bowing. Yudhishthira stakes Draupadi and loses. For a moment, even Shakuni's dice seem to pause in the air before they land. The sound when they hit the board is the same as before, just little clicks. But the meaning is different now. It's as if the lamps dim slightly, ashamed to shine on what comes next. Duryodhana commands that Draupadi be brought into the hall. The order is delivered with the casualness of someone requesting a drink. Draupadi is in her chambers, not dressed for court. She is not meant to be seen like this, but that does not matter to men who have decided she is a prize. Dushasana goes to fetch her. You hear the commotion before you see her. Footsteps, a scuffle, a gasp that turns into furious murmuring. Then she is there, dragged by her hair. Her face is pale with shock, then fierce with anger. Her eyes sweep the hall, over elders, over kings, over warriors who have sworn oaths to protect women and righteousness and honor. She speaks, and her voice does not break. She demands to know how she can be wagered when her husband has already wagered himself. The question hangs in the hall like smoke. No one answers at first. Bhishma's throat tightens. He knows the law. He knows the order of things, but the law has been twisted so expertly that every path out seems blocked. If he speaks too strongly, he breaks his place beside the throne. If he stays silent, he breaks something deeper. His hand moves to the hilt of his sword. You see it, you feel it in your own body. That instinct, draw, stop this, end it. The metal under his palm is cool, solid. And yet, he does not draw. His vow holds his arm the way chains hold a door. Draupadi's voice rises again, sharper now, naming the shame of the hall. Somewhere, a younger prince, Vaikarna, stands and speaks on her behalf, brave enough to say what the elders won't. For one brief moment, it seems like the hall might wake up. Then Karna cuts him down with words, cold and contemptuous, and the hall sinks back into its paralysis. Duryodhana laughs. He tells Draupadi to sit on his thigh. That is the moment the air changes completely. It goes heavy. Even the incense seems to sour. Bhishma's vision blurs, not from tears, not yet, but from the strain of holding himself still. Draupadi refuses. Dushasana reaches for her cloth. And now, finally, the hall's silence becomes unbearable. This is not war. There are no chariots, no banners, no conch shells. It is worse because it is happening in a place built for justice, surrounded by men who know better. Draupadi turns her face upward, and in her desperation, she calls for Krishna. Not for the court, not for the elders, for Krishna. The lamps flicker as if a wind has entered the hall, though the doors are closed. And something shifts, subtle, strange, undeniable. Dushasana tugs at her garment again, and it does not end the way he intends. Cloth appears, more cloth, layer after layer, as if the universe itself has decided that this humiliation will not be completed. The pile of fabric grows. Dushasana's arms begin to tremble with effort. His face twists from triumph to confusion to exhaustion. The court stares, caught between awe and dread. Draupadi remains standing, protected by something no one can command and no one can argue with. At last, Dushasana stumbles back, spent, his purpose defeated. But the hall does not feel victorious. It feels stained. Bhima swears vengeance, his voice low and terrible, and you can sense the future tightening like a knot. Dhritarashtra, shaken by omens and fear, offers boons to Draupadi to calm the storm he has allowed to rise. She asks for Yudhishthira's freedom, then Bhima's, then Arjuna's, and the twins. They are released. For a heartbeat, It seems the fire might be smothered. But Duryodhana cannot let it rest. Another dice game is demanded. The stakes are exile, 12 years in the forest, 1 year hidden. Yudhishthira agrees, because he cannot refuse, because his weakness wears the mask of honor and he cannot see through it. The dice roll again, they lose again, and now the hall empties differently, not with laughter, not with ordinary footsteps, but with the heavy shuffle of consequence. You watch the Pandavas leave, their heads high, their hearts hardening. Draupadi walks with them, her gaze forward, her humiliation carried like a torch. Bhishma remains behind. The lamps burn low. The incense dies down to a thin thread of smoke. His hand is still on his sword. Only now, when it is too late, he feels how useless a sword can be. Steel can stop an enemy in the open field. It cannot cut through vows. It cannot slice apart the quiet cowardice of a hall full of elders who sat still. You stand in the cooling assembly hall with him, and the marble underfoot feels colder than it should. The silence has a taste, dry, bitter, like ash you can't spit out. Outside, night settles over Hastinapura. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, the Ganga keeps flowing, indifferent and eternal. In the distance, jackals call again, as if remembering the day Duryodhana was born. Bhishma does not weep in public. He simply looks at the empty throne. He feels the weight of his vow pressing down, not like armor now, but like stone. And in the deep place behind his ribs, where he keeps the things he never says, a single thought sits awake. He has watched the fire spread for decades. Tonight, it has reached the heart of the house. 13 years of exile, failed peace missions, hands folded in courtrooms, then hands closing around spear shafts, and then the morning the conch shells finally blow. It hits you in the chest first, a long rolling sound that seems to pull the sky tight like cloth. Then another conch answers and another, until the air itself feels crowded. You're standing on Kurukshetra, with dust already clinging to your ankles, and the ground is cool only for a moment. The sun is rising fast, the way it does on wide plains. Even the wind feels like it's hurrying. They call this field sacred. And it is. But today, it smells like oiled leather, nervous horses, and the sharp sweetness of crushed grass under too many feet. Far off, banners wake up in the breeze, silk snapping, gold catching light, painted emblems, lions, suns, moons, staring down like they have opinions. And there, at the heart of the Kaurava host, sits Bhishma. He is old, not frail. Old the way a mountain is old. His armor looks like it has been worn into him, fitted by decades and not by a smith. His white hair is bound back, neat as a vow. His longbow rests across his knees like a familiar weight. You can hear the army around him trying to be brave, men laughing too loudly, elephants rumbling like they're complaining about the whole arrangement. Somewhere a horse keeps snorting, as if the smell of war is personally insulting. Bhishma is named commander, not because anyone votes, not because anyone argues, because when a house is burning, everyone suddenly remembers where the well is. He rises, the motion is simple, and somehow the Kaurava line steadies just from that. You feel it, this strange shift, like the day has decided what it will be. He looks across the field. On the other side are the boys he raised. Not boys anymore. Men with their own banners, their own scars, their own silences. There's Bhima, broad as a door and twice as loud, even when he says nothing. There's Yudhishthira, upright as a pillar, looking like he hasn't slept in a lifetime. And there's Arjuna. Arjuna's chariot is bright, too bright, like a piece of morning sun that fell to earth and decided to stay. Krishna drives, barely armored, calm. It's almost funny, in a dry way, that the most dangerous chariot on the field has a charioteer who looks like he could walk into a music hall instead. But the reins in his hands look like they belong there. You stand close enough to Bhishma to see the smallest thing. His fingers flex once on his bowstring. Not fear, not doubt, memory, because he remembers Arjuna as a child, begging to be allowed to practice one more hour. He remembers Arjuna's eyes when he finally hit a target without blinking. Pride, joy, like a lamp being lit. Now the same eyes are across the field, narrowed, steady, waiting. The rules are spoken before the first charge. Equal against equal. No striking the retreating, no attacking the unarmed. A code laid down like fresh cloth on a thorny path. Then the conches roar again, and the cloth tears immediately. The first day breaks open like a pot dropped from a height. Chariots surge forward, wheels chewing the earth. Elephants push through the press, their bells clanging, their breath hot and heavy. Arrows rise in clouds, dark, glittering, almost pretty from a distance. You taste dust and ghee smoke, and you realize how quickly your mouth dries in this heat. The air is full of sound, hooves, drums, shouts, the thin, hard snap of bowstrings, and above it all, the steady thunder of Bhishma's chariot moving. He fights like someone who has been waiting too long, not with rage, with precision. His arrows don't waste themselves. They don't wobble. They go where they are sent, as if they're grateful to finally have purpose. Warriors fall back from him without meaning to. Not running, just deciding all at once that their courage has an appointment elsewhere. You're close enough to see his face between volleys. It isn't wild. It isn't triumphant. It looks like a man doing what he promised he would do and quietly hating the fact that he's so good at it. By noon, the field feels different. The sacred grass is gone beneath churned earth. The sun sits overhead like an iron plate. Sweat stings your eyes, and every breath tastes faintly of metal from the air. Bhishma's banner is still up, still moving, still unbroken. And in the Kaurava lines, men start saying it with awe, the way people say the name of a river in flood. Bhishma, Bhishma, Bhishma. That night, when the sky turns violet and the heat loosens its grip, the camps settle into a restless quiet. Fires flicker, pots simmer. Armor is unstrapped with hands that shake from exhaustion, not fear, though fear is there too, sitting in everyone's lap like an unwanted child. You walk near Bhishma's tent. The smell of sandalwood hangs around it, stubborn and clean, as if refusing to admit where it is. Inside, he sits with his longbow laid beside him, and his eyes look far away, even while they watch the present. Krishna comes, not marching like a conqueror, not swaggering. He comes the way a man comes to check on an elder he respects, even if that elder is his enemy. There isn't a long argument, no performance. Krishna speaks plainly, in that quiet way of his that makes you lean in without meaning to. He reminds Bhishma of the boys on the other side. He reminds him of Draupadi in the hall. He reminds him, without malice, of the cost of holding back. Bhishma listens, and his answer is just as plain. He will fight. He will keep the vows that made him who he is. But he will not stop being what he has always been, a guardian of the throne, even when the throne doesn't deserve guarding. Krishna leaves as calmly as he came. Outside, someone laughs too loudly over a pot of lentils that has burned. A soldier shouts at another soldier for stealing his blanket, as if the world can be made normal by arguing about blankets. The second day arrives with a harsh, clear light. You wake to the smell of trampled marigolds from yesterday's garlands, crushed into the earth. It's strange, war mixing with festival flowers, like the land can't decide what season it is. Bhishma takes the field again, and the days begin to blur. Not because nothing happens, because too much happens. Formations rise and collapse like waves. A line holds for an hour, then breaks in a moment. A hero advances, then is swallowed by the press. Bhishma moves through it all like a steady, inevitable thing. Sometimes you catch sight of Arjuna's chariot darting like a bright fish through darker water. Sometimes you see Bhima charging and men scattering as if a storm has picked a direction. Sometimes you hear Yudhishthira's conch and feel for an instant the stubborn dignity of a man who cannot bend. But always, somewhere, Bhishma's longbow keeps speaking. You're standing near a knot of wounded chariots one afternoon when Bhishma passes and the air changes. It's like the field exhales to make room for him. A young warrior on the Kaurava side lifts his spear with trembling pride, desperate to be seen. He rushes forward too soon. He nearly trips over a broken wheel. Someone yanks him back by the belt just in time, scolding him as if he's a child running into a river current. Even in war, elders still fuss. By the fourth day, the heat becomes a character of its own. The sun doesn't just shine, it presses. Armor burns where it touches skin. Leather straps bite. Water tastes warm the moment it hits your tongue. And still the conches blow, as if anyone needs encouragement. In the Pandava camp, men stare at Bhishma from across the field with a kind of helpless anger, not hatred, something worse, the feeling of trying to push down a pillar with your bare hands. You hear it whispered on both sides. How can you defeat the one who taught you to stand? Bhishma, for his part, keeps fighting, and the tragedy sharpens. He could end it quickly if he wanted to. He could bring down the men he loves. But his hands hesitate in the smallest ways. A fraction of a breath, a choice to turn an arrow aside, a decision to strike a banner instead of a heart. He is deadly, and he is careful. That carefulness doesn't save anyone else, because the field fills with others. Princes who dreamed of songs being sung about them. Old soldiers who thought they'd be home by harvest season. Men with names you'll never learn, whose mothers will wait by doorways that stay empty. The war claims them all the same. One dusk, a wind rises out of nowhere. Dust whips across the camps so thick the horizon disappears. You blink and taste grit. Fires sputter. Horses stamp and roll their eyes. A few men mutter that the sky is warning them, but warning is just another sound, and this field already has too many. On the sixth day, Bhishma drives straight into the Pandava lines. From where you stand, it looks impossible, like watching a single chariot push into a river and somehow make the river step aside. Arjuna rushes to meet him. For a moment, the world narrows to two longbows. You hear the clean twang of Gandiva. You hear Bhishma's older longbow answer, deeper in tone, like a drum compared to a flute. Arrows meet arrows in midair. Some break, some veer, some land where they were never meant to. Time doesn't stop, but it feels slowed, thickened, as if the air is turned to honey. You can see Arjuna's jaw tighten. You can see Bhishma's eyes soften for an instant. A strange thing to feel tenderness in the middle of a battlefield. But it's there, like a hidden spring under stone. Arjuna fights fiercely. Bhishma matches him. And still, there's that invisible line Bhishma won't cross. He drives Arjuna back again and again, but he doesn't take the final step. He doesn't send the last arrow. If you didn't know him, you'd call it mercy. If you do know him, you call it something heavier. By the 7th and 8th days, fatigue becomes its own weapon. Hands cramp around bowstrings. Eyes blur from sun glare and dust. Voices go hoarse, shouting commands that dissolve in noise. At night, men lie on thin blankets and stare at the stars, too wired to sleep, too drained to move. The smell of smoke clings to hair, to beards, to the folds of cloth. In the Kaurava camp, Duryodhana grows sharper with frustration. You can feel it like a thorn in the air. He has Bhishma, he has Drona, he has Karna waiting like a coiled rope. And still the Pandavas stand. Duryodhana prowls his tent at night, restless, snapping at servants, demanding news that sounds better than the truth. He goes to Bhishma, not with humility, not with patience. He pours out his fear and anger the way a man spills hot oil and then complains the floor is burning. Bhishma listens. And when he speaks, his words are simple enough to chill you. He will not strike Shikhandi. He says it without drama, without apology, as if naming the color of the sky. Shikhandi, born as a woman once, changed by fate and fire and longing. Bhishma will not raise his weapons against that. It is a boundary, a private line drawn in the middle of a public slaughter. And as soon as he says it, you feel it. A hinge turning, a hidden door opening. The 9th night is heavy. The sky is cloudless, but it feels like something is pressing down anyway. The fires in camp burn low, as if they're tired too. Across the field, in the Pandava camp, a decision forms. You can almost hear it happening, the way you can hear a storm gather before the first drop falls. They go to Bhishma, not sneaking like thieves, not swaggering like conquerors. They go as sons go to an elder who has become an enemy. You walk with them in your mind's eye, across the dark field, stepping over broken shafts that crack softly underfoot. The earth is still warm from the day's heat. The air smells of damp grass where blood has soaked in, and the night has cooled it. They reach him, they bow, and then they ask him the question that should never exist in a world with decent rules. How can you be brought down? Bhishma doesn't pretend not to understand. He doesn't make them beg. He tells them the truth. Place Shikhandi in front. Let Arjuna strike from behind. Bhishma will not answer Shikhandi with weapons, and without that answer, the door stands open. Arjuna reacts the way a good man reacts when he's asked to do something that feels like betrayal. He remembers being small. He remembers Bhishma lifting him onto a horse. He remembers being praised, being corrected, being loved in the strict way warriors love. His stomach turns. Krishna is there too, watching. And Krishna's gaze is steady, not cruel. He presses Arjuna forward with the terrible kindness of someone who knows the war will not stop for anyone's feelings. By the time the Pandavas leave, the night feels colder. You return to the Kaurava camp, and you see Bhishma sitting alone. The old man looks up at the stars, not pleading, not praying, just waiting, as if he's already heard the footsteps of his own end. Morning comes, the 10th day. The light is pale at first, washed thin like cloth, dipped too many times. Then the sun climbs and the world hardens into brightness. You're standing near the front when you see Shikhandi. He rides forward, not with a roar, not with theatrics, just forward, steady, like an arrow already loosed. His armor is dark, his eyes are fixed ahead, and something about his presence makes the air tighten. This is not only a warrior, this is a promise returning. Behind him, Arjuna's chariot rolls into position. Krishna's hands tighten gently on the reins. The horses toss their heads, restless, sensing what you sense. Bhishma sees Shikhandi. You can't miss the shift in him. His jaw sets, his gaze narrows, not in fear, in recognition. For a heartbeat, you're not on Kurukshetra anymore. You're back in Kashi with 3 terrified princesses in a chariot. You're hearing Amba's voice, broken and furious. You're watching a wrong thing being done by a man who believed he was doing right. And now that wrong thing has grown up. Now it rides toward him with a longbow in hand. Bhishma lifts his weapon anyway, because he is Bhishma. He sends arrows out, swift, bright, controlling the space around Shikhandi without striking Shikhandi. A strange dance, like a storm refusing to touch one tree. Shikhandi advances. Arjuna draws Gandiva. The first arrows fly. They don't come from Shikhandi. They come from behind Shikhandi's shoulder. You can hear the difference in sound. Gandiva's sharp note, clean as metal struck. Arjuna is shooting through the gap that Bhishma himself has created by his vow. Bhishma's eyes flick toward Arjuna, not angry, not accusing, almost proud, the way a teacher is proud when a student finally learns a lesson, even when the lesson is used against him. Arjuna's arrows keep coming, one, then many. They strike Bhishma's armor, they catch at the edges of his sleeves, they pin his cloak, they thud into his chariot's rail. Each impact is a punctuation mark. Bhishma answers with volleys meant for anyone else. He brings down warriors who rush in foolishly, trying to protect him. He clears space. He refuses to step aside. But the arrows don't stop. The field seems to hush around this one clash, as if thousands of men have all decided to hold their breath. You feel your own breath held too. The smell of dust is stronger now. The earth churned to powder. It coats your tongue. It clings to your eyelashes. Somewhere, an elephant trumpets, long, mournful, like it, understands. Arjuna's arms don't tremble, but his face does something small, tight. This is not shooting at a stranger. This is aiming at the man who taught him where to place his feet. Bhishma's body begins to look unreal, not wounded in some grotesque way, just covered, as if arrows have become rain, and he has stood too long in the storm. He sways once. His charioteer reaches out, instinctive. Bhishma makes a small motion that stops him. No rescue, no retreat. The end comes the way endings come for mountains. Slow. Then, all at once, Bhishma's knees bend. His longbow slips from his hand, finally too heavy for even him. His gaze lifts briefly toward the sun, bright and merciless above. Then he falls. But he doesn't fall like other men. He doesn't strike the earth. Arrows catch him. A bed made in midair. Shafts under his back. Shafts under his arms. Shafts cradling his legs. He lies suspended, held above the ground, like a man who has become too sacred to touch dirt. The battlefield goes quiet in a way you didn't think possible. No one cheers. No one rushes forward, screaming triumph. Even Duryodhana, somewhere behind you, seems to forget how to breathe, because the pillar has fallen, because the impossible has happened. You're standing there, staring, and you realize your hands are cold despite the heat. Your mouth tastes like dust and disbelief. The air smells suddenly clean, as if the world has paused to listen. Bhishma's eyes are open. He is still alive. Of course he is. He has always chosen his moment. Around him, men begin to gather. Kauravas and Pandavas both. Enemies who have spent 10 days trying to bring each other down, now moving with the careful steps of worshippers. No one knows what to do with their hands. Weapons lower. Longbows tilt toward the ground. Someone starts forward with soft cushions, rich pillows, meant for a palace bed. It looks almost comical against the plain brutality of the field, as if silk could fix what arrows have done. Bhishma looks at them, and even now, even here, you can feel his old discipline. The field is quiet enough that when he speaks, it travels. Only one short sentence, dry as dust. A warrior does not rest on softness. The cushions stop. The men who carried them look helpless, like children caught doing something foolish. Arjuna stands nearby, his longbow lowered, his chest rising and falling too fast. Krishna's chariot is behind him. The horses sweating, their flanks quivering. Krishna watches Bhishma, not celebrating, not grieving openly, just watching, as if seeing the shape of time itself, lying there on arrows. Bhishma's gaze finds Arjuna again, and something in Bhishma's face loosens. Not defeat, not humiliation, relief. A strange, quiet relief that slips through the armor and the pain and the pride. Like a man who has carried a burden for a lifetime and has finally set it down. The sun moves overhead. The wind stirs the banners gently, almost tenderly, and the sacred field of Kurukshetra, so loud for 10 days, holds its breath around the old man who will not touch the earth. But Bhishma didn't die when the arrows pierced him. The day keeps moving as if it doesn't care what happened. Light shifts, heat softens a little. A dry wind drags the smell of trampled grass across the field. And there he is, still above the earth, held up on a lattice of shafts, like the world decided he wasn't allowed to lie down yet. You're standing close enough that you can hear the small sounds. A horse stamping once, impatient. A banner rope creaking. Someone's armor settling as they swallow and breathe. Bhishma's eyes stay clear. That is the unsettling part. Not the arrows, not the silence. It's the steadiness, as if he's chosen to become a landmark. A few men try again with those soft cushions. They hold them out like offerings, a little embarrassed. Bhishma looks at them the way a patient teacher looks at a student who has brought a fish to a fire sacrifice. He refuses, gently but absolutely. The princes and kings shift their weight, unsure where to put their loyalty now, because in front of you is the man who raised them, and behind you is the war that can't stop just because everyone feels ashamed for a moment. Arjuna is the one who moves. He steps closer with that heavy longbow, Gandiva, lowered like it has suddenly become too sacred to lift. His face is dusty. His eyes look too young for the work he's been doing. Bhishma indicates with the smallest tilt of his head that he wants a pillow, not silk, not cotton, something fit for a warrior. So Arjuna does the only thing Arjuna can do. He plants his feet in the grit. He draws, and he sends a handful of arrows into the earth at just the right angles, close and precise. In a breath, a headrest rises, shafts laid like a careful braid. A pillow made of what brought Bhishma down. You can smell the warm dust puff up where the arrowheads bite. You can hear the faint, clean thunk of metal finding soil. The sound is almost satisfying, in the way a lock sounds when it finally turns. Bhishma lets his head settle onto it. And for the first time since he fell, the field exhales. Not joy, not relief. Something quieter, a truth settling into place. Physicians arrive, of course. They come bustling in with their bags and their serious faces, as if authority can argue with fate. They kneel and peer and begin to gesture, already imagining themselves as saviors. Bhishma stops them. He doesn't raise his voice. He barely moves, but his refusal lands like a stone dropped into a pond. No ripples needed. They understand. They back away, suddenly remembering they are ordinary men. The armies, finally, begin to pull back. Chariots turn. Elephants are guided away with soft prods and murmured words. Horses toss their heads and snort, glad to leave the bitter smell of fear behind. And you, if you listen, can hear it. Kurukshetra, going quiet, not peaceful, just quiet in the way a forest goes quiet after a tiger passes through. Evening comes. Someone lights lamps near Bhishma, because even warriors prefer not to talk to the dark. Ghee flames tremble in the wind and throw small halos across his face. Bhishma asks for water, not as a complaint, as a simple fact of being alive in a dry mouth under a hot sky on a bed of iron. Soft-skinned attendants hurry off with pots and cups. They return with water that's already warmed by travel and panic. Bhishma refuses that too. He asks for water worthy of him, water that remembers the river. And Arjuna, still standing there like a boy caught between apology and obedience, does something strange. He walks a short distance away to a spot of earth that looks no different from any other. He draws a single arrow and aims it down. When the arrow strikes, the ground answers. A thin spring breaks open, bright and sudden. Water rises clear and cool, as if the Ganga herself has reached up a finger to touch him. You can hear it trickling. A small sound, almost domestic, on a field built for thunder. They bring that water to Bhishma. He drinks. His throat moves once, then again. His eyes close for the length of one calm breath, and when he opens them, he looks less like a commander and more like something older, like a man remembering his mother's hands. Night settles fully. From the two camps, far apart now, the sounds begin. Low chanting, the clink of cooking pots, the occasional muffled sob someone thinks nobody hears. And Bhishma lies there, held above the earth, lit by a few wavering flames. He tells those near him that he will not leave his body yet. Not tonight, not tomorrow. He has a boon, a last strange privilege in a life built out of vows. He will choose his moment. He says the sun is in the wrong direction. He will wait for the great turn-in, when light begins its northward journey again. 58 days. That number lands oddly in the mind. Long enough for routine to form. Long enough for grief to stop feeling sharp and start feeling heavy. Long enough for a battlefield to become familiar. You can feel your own shoulders tense at the thought of it. 58 dawns and dusks, watching the same old man breathe. And still, even now, nobody argues with Bhishma, because something about him has always made men obey, even when obeying costs them everything. The first morning after his fall arrives with a thin, pale light. Mist creeps low over the ground, clinging to broken chariot wheels and abandoned garlands. The air smells of cold ash and crushed leaves. You stand beside the arrow bed again, and you realize how unnatural it is, how the human mind keeps expecting him to sink down, to rest, but the arrows hold. Bhishma's breathing is steady. His eyes follow the horizon, like he's watching for a familiar visitor. Warriors begin to come. At first, it's cautious. A few from the Kaurava side approach, stepping softly, as if the earth might scold them for making noise. Then, some from the Pandava side, then kings from both, men who were trying to bring each other down yesterday, now walking like pilgrims. They come to bow, not because the war has ended, it hasn't, but because Bhishma is bigger than the sides. He is the ancestor everyone shares, whether they like it or not. A few try to speak, to offer comfort, to say something worthy. The words fall apart in their mouths. They settle for touch. A palm pressed briefly to the ground, a forehead lowered, a garland laid near his feet. Bhishma receives it all without sentiment, but there is kindness in him. A quiet kind of kindness that doesn't perform. When someone cries, he doesn't ask them to stop. He just lets the tears happen, like rain that must fall. And the war continues. That is the cruel part. You can hear distant conches announcing the next day's clash. The sound rolls over the plain like a wave. Bhishma doesn't flinch. He listens, and you can almost see him measuring it. How many will fall today? How many mothers will wake with a bad feeling and not know why? Sometimes a runner comes, dusty, panting, bringing news. Who has been defeated? Which formation broke? Which prince has been carried away, silent, eyes staring at nothing? Bhishma takes it in. No celebration, no despair. Only the look of a man watching a storm cross the sea, knowing he helped call it. At midday, the heat returns, like a hand pressed to your neck. The ghee in the lamps melts faster. Flies gather at the edges of everything, bold and buzzing. Servants shade Bhishma with cloth canopies, but the wind keeps trying to steal them. It snaps the fabric and tugs it sideways, as if the sky wants a clearer view. Bhishma sometimes smiles at small failures like that. A canopy that won't stay straight. A young attendant who tries to sweep dust off a battlefield, determined to win an argument with the whole world. Even on an arrow bed, life keeps offering these little absurdities. One day, Duryodhana comes. He walks up stiffly, like pride is a kind of armor that pinches. The prince's face is hard, but his eyes look tired, and that is new. He bows because he must. Bhishma looks at him for a long moment. He doesn't curse him. He doesn't bless him. He simply speaks to him the way he always has, like an elder to a child who refuses to listen. He tells him to make peace, to stop throwing his house into a fire for the sake of winning a single room. Duryodhana's jaw tightens. He can't accept it. Not really. He leaves with the same stubbornness he arrived with, but slower, as if, for the first time, he has felt what it is like to be small. And you watch him go and think, even now, even with Bhishma pinned to the sky on arrows, the boy cannot let go. Days pass, the rhythm becomes strange. Morning, visitors, midday, heat, water, quiet council, evening, lamps, the low hum of camps settling, the distant echoes of another day's battle. Sometimes clouds gather and refuse to rain. Sometimes a brief shower comes and darkens the dust, and the smell rises, earthy, sweet, almost clean for a moment. That smell does something to the mind. It makes you remember forests, rivers. The old world before this field became the center of everything. Bhishma watches the sky too. When lightning flickers in the far distance, it lights his face for an instant. Old cheekbones, a calm mouth, not a man waiting to be rescued, a man waiting to finish. He speaks when someone asks. And people do ask, because now they finally understand how much time he has. A king asks about alliances, about what comes next. Bhishma tells him plainly, war eats plans. It makes clever men simple. A young warrior asks how to be fearless. Bhishma tells him, fear doesn't disappear. You learn to walk with it, like walking with a wild dog that might bite, but might also guard you. Sometimes someone asks about the past, about Shantanu, about old battles, about the days when the Kuru court felt like a home instead of a trap. Then Bhishma's gaze goes far away. You can almost see the river in his eyes. You can almost smell wet reeds and hear oars tapping against a boat. He remembers, but he doesn't drown in remembering. He returns to the present every time, because that is the discipline he has practiced his whole life. You come close enough one evening to hear him speak about vows, not in grand, holy language, in the plain tone of a man describing a rope. A vow, he says, holds you steady, and a vow can also tie you to something that is burning. His voice stays even, but the truth in it is sharp, because he is lying there as proof. Another day, another procession of men who never thought they'd bow to an enemy. Shikhandi comes once. He stands at a distance, uneasy, like someone who has arrived at the end of a long road and doesn't know where to put his hands now. The air around him feels tense. Bhishma looks toward him without anger, only recognition. The curse has done what curses do. It has found its shape. Shikhandi doesn't come closer. He leaves again. And for a moment, as his steps fade, you feel Amba's fierce eyes somewhere behind all of this, finally satisfied. The nights begin to cool. The wind comes differently, less like a furnace breath, more like a roaming animal looking for warmth. Men wrap shawls tighter. The fires in the camps burn lower and steadier. Bhishma remains uncovered, mostly, not because he doesn't feel cold, because discomfort has never been enough to move him. Still, attendants bring him blankets. He allows them, sometimes with a faint look that says, "Fine, you can win this tiny battle." And in the Kaurava camp, command has shifted. Drona now stands where Bhishma stood. You can feel the change in the field even from here. Different rhythms, different strengths. News comes faster, more frantic. A prince falls, a formation breaks, another oath is sworn over a still form laid out under a tree. Bhishma listens to all of it, and sometimes his eyelids lower, not from sleep, but from the weight of it. One afternoon, as the sun slides toward evening, Krishna comes, not as a distant charioteer, not as a strategist calling for formations. He comes quietly, with a few companions behind him, walking like a man arriving at a friend's house. You can feel the shift before he even reaches the arrow bed. The air tightens, the hairs on your arms rise. Even the men who dislike him step back as if something vast has entered the space and they don't want to stand too close to it. Krishna approaches Bhishma. Bhishma's face changes. Not much, just a softening around the eyes, like a warrior finally seeing the one person in the world who understands the whole shape of his life. Krishna sits near him on the ground, careless of dust and rank. He looks up at Bhishma, the way you look up at an old tree you've known since childhood. They speak, not in sharp back and forth, not like negotiators. Krishna reminds him of everything they both know, that this field is sacred and terrible, that men have done what they swore they would never do. That time is moving, indifferent and exact. Bhishma tells Krishna simply that he has waited a long time to be able to rest. And Krishna, whose face can hold laughter and sorrow in the same breath, lets something gentler appear. He tells Bhishma he has served as he believed he must. He has kept what he promised. Bhishma's eyes glisten then, not the dramatic tears of a broken man, the quiet tears of someone who has finally reached the end of a long discipline and found, waiting there, not applause, only truth. Bhishma looks at Krishna and sees something he has always suspected, but never allowed himself to name: the shape behind the shape. Not just a prince of the Yadavas, not just a friend of the Pandavas, something older than the river, something that holds the river like a thread. Bhishma's breath catches once, and in a voice so low you have to lean in to catch it. He offers a single brief praise, barely more than a whisper, one short line: "Only you were always free." It's the only direct thing he says like that. Everything else is felt, not declared. Krishna stays for a while. He speaks of the coming days, of what must still happen. He does not pretend it will be gentle. Then he rises. Before leaving, he looks at Bhishma, the way a man looks at a lamp that has burned faithfully all night, with gratitude, with inevitability. When Krishna walks away, the air slowly becomes ordinary again. But it never becomes the same. More days, the war surges and collapses in waves you can hear from afar. Some mornings the noise is so thick you feel it in your teeth. Conchas, drums, the rolling roar of men trying to become legends. Then it fades into the thin, tired sounds of evening, and the field turns into a wide silence again. Bhishma remains. 58 days is long enough for the mind to do strange things. You begin to notice small details you didn't notice before. How the light touches the arrow shafts at sunrise, turning them briefly gold. How ants will climb anything, even a weapon, even a battlefield, even the edge of greatness. How a single stubborn bird will return each morning to peck at something invisible in the dust. Bhishma watches these things too. Sometimes he closes his eyes and seems to go inward, deep enough that the field cannot reach him. Other times he speaks to whoever sits nearest, as if he knows precisely who needs to hear what. A young prince from some allied kingdom sits beside him once, trembling with the effort of being brave. Bhishma tells him courage isn't loud. It's just staying when you want to run. A messenger comes, frantic, announcing some new twist, some new grief. Bhishma listens and then says mildly, "That panic is never a plan." It would almost be funny, the calmness of it. A boy comes to fan him and falls asleep doing it. The fan droops. A fly lands boldly on the boy's cheek. Another attendant notices and tries to wake him, mortified. Bhishma stops that too. He lets the boy sleep, because the boy has no idea he is fanning one of the most feared men on earth. He only knows he is tired. And Bhishma, who has lived a life of duty, understands tiredness better than most. The war ends, not with a single clean moment, but with a long, exhausted fading. One day the conches are fewer, then fewer still. The field, that had been a living thing of noise and motion, becomes still in patches. Men walk instead of run. And then, finally, the sound you hear most is the wind. It moves through broken standards. It slides over quiet chariot tracks. It stirs ash from old fires. The survivors begin to arrive at Bhishma's arrow bed differently now, not as warriors pausing mid-war, as people who have come back from a long fever. The Pandavas come. They look older than they should. They stand near Bhishma like sons standing near the bed of a father who has outlived the household. Yudhishthira steps forward, the new king, though he doesn't look like a man who wants that title. His shoulders are heavy. His eyes are shadowed. You can feel it on him. The strange emptiness after victory, when nothing tastes the way you thought it would. He bows low, and then he does something that surprises you with its simplicity. He sits right there on the ground near the arrow bed, close enough to hear Bhishma's breathing, close enough to be taught like a student again. Bhishma looks down at him for a long time, not judging, not praising, seeing, because Bhishma knows what kind of man Yudhishthira is. A man who will punish himself more fiercely than any enemy could. And Bhishma begins to teach, not as a lecture to a crowd, as a steady stream of counsel offered to a man who has too much power and too much grief. He speaks of kingship, of how a king must protect the weak even when it costs him pride, of how wealth is not the king's personal ornament, but a river meant to flow. He speaks of listening, how a court that only echoes the king's desires becomes a trap. He speaks of restraint, how the throne makes appetite look like policy. Yudhishthira listens like a starving man. Sometimes his face tightens as if the words hurt. Sometimes his eyes close briefly, like he's drinking something bitter and necessary. Around them, the surviving warriors stand and sit in a loose ring. The air smells of ghee and dust and the faint sharpness of burnt wood. Somewhere far away, a jackal calls once, then falls silent again. Even the men who hate each other do not interrupt, because there are moments in life when the old rules pause, and this is one of them. Bhishma speaks also of forgiveness, not the kind that pretends nothing happened, the kind that releases the heart from chewing the same grief forever. He tells Yudhishthira that sorrow will not end by being fed. It will only grow strong. He tells him that a king must grieve, yes, but a king must also rise each morning and do what needs doing. It is strange hearing this from Bhishma, because you remember him standing in the dice hall, hand on sword, saying nothing. And yet, here he is, giving words like water, as if this is the atonement he can offer now. Yudhishthira asks questions, not rapid, not argumentative, slow, careful questions from a man terrified of doing wrong again. Bhishma answers each one, sometimes with direct advice, sometimes with a story from the past, sometimes with a reminder that the world is messy and duty rarely arrives clean. The days keep passing, and through all of it, the sun continues its slow travel across the sky, lowering and lowering toward that turning point. The nights become colder. Dew forms on grass and on the edges of abandoned armor, making everything look briefly purified at dawn. Your breath becomes visible in the early morning air. Men pull their cloaks tight and huddle near small fires. Bhishma remains on arrows. Attendants bring him warm water and thin broths, and he takes only what he needs. Not because he is proud, because he is preparing. You can feel it in the way his gaze settles more inward now, like a man packing up a room. He begins to speak less, not because he has nothing left, because what remains cannot be said. One evening, the sky clears completely. Stars spread across it in a hard, bright scatter. The moon hangs like a bowl turned upside down. The field is quiet enough that you can hear the Ganga in your memory, even from here. Someone lights a lamp beside Bhishma again. The flame shakes in the cold wind, and the light makes the arrowheads gleam faintly, like a crown made of metal thorns. Bhishma's eyes open. He looks toward the horizon where the sun will rise, and you understand with a calm certainty that settles in your bones, that the moment is close. The next morning arrives sharper, clearer. The air feels washed. The sun rises, pale at first, then stronger, and something about its path feels different, as if it has finally decided to return. The northward turning, the auspicious shift. Word spreads quickly, but softly. No one shouts it. No one needs to. The Pandavas gather. Some Kaurava survivors come too, those who are still alive to carry respect. Krishna is there again, standing slightly apart, his face calm in that unreadable way. You stand close enough to see Bhishma's chest rise and fall. Slow, very slow now. Bhishma asks for a few final things, not riches, not revenge. He asks to see the faces. He asks to give his last counsel. He speaks briefly, one last gift to Yudhishthira, reminding him to hold his people like a mother holds her children. Firmly, tenderly, he looks at Arjuna, and something passes between them. Not forgiveness. Something older than that, a recognition of love, even inside terrible acts. Bhishma's gaze moves to Krishna one last time, and this time he doesn't search. He simply rests his eyes there, like a traveler resting at a familiar shrine. The wind stills for a moment. The lamps burn straight. Even the horses in the distance stop fussing, as if they too have been trained to stand quietly at the right moment. Bhishma draws a breath, holds it, and then, as the sun climbs its new path, he lets go. No struggle, no theatrical gesture, just release. A long life leaving the body the way a hand opens and drops a burden it has carried for too many years. For a moment, nobody moves. Not because they are frozen, because they are listening to the silence that follows. It feels wide. It feels clean. Then someone bows. Then another. The air fills with the soft rustle of cloth and the small sounds of men trying to honor something they don't have words for. The sun continues northward, indifferent and golden, and Bhishma, who once swore his terrible vow by the river, finally lies down, not on softness, not on earth, but on the only thing he ever truly trusted, his own promise. The wind moves again across Kurukshetra. It lifts a little dust. It carries the faint smell of the distant river, and the field, so long loud with duty and pride, becomes quiet enough that you can almost hear water flowing somewhere beyond the horizon, steady and eternal, as if it has been waiting for him to come home. The wind is different now, not the sharp, dust-soaring wind of chariots and marching feet. This one comes softer, like evening air sliding through tall grass. It carries the faintest trace of river mud and flowering reeds, and for a moment, your mind remembers something that isn't war. You can almost feel cool stone under your palms again. You can almost hear water, steady and patient, doing what it has always done. So after all of that, after the vow, the war, the arrows, the waiting, what were the ancient storytellers trying to tell us? It starts at the river, because that's where Bhishma begins. Not as Bhishma, not as the grandsire on a battlefield, but as a boy with wet hair and shining eyes, Devavrata, standing between a father and a mother, who is also the Ganga. You can still see the mist lifting off the water in the early light, and you can still feel the strange ache of being loved by someone who cannot stay. That beginning matters. It's the first time you see the great pattern of this life. Love comes with conditions. Even divine love, even a king's love, even a mother, river's love. And when those conditions are broken, something leaves, something disappears into the current. Then comes the vow. You can almost hear it again, not as a thunderclap, but as a clean, decisive sound, like a sword sliding into its sheath. A young man making a promise so complete that the heavens themselves scatter flowers. And it feels beautiful, doesn't it? It feels like devotion made visible. A father is starving himself with longing. A son decides to fix it. In that moment, Bhishma's promise looks like the highest kind of love, giving up your own future so someone else can have theirs. You can smell the riverbank flowers, the sharp sweetness of them, and you can feel the pride rising in Shantanu's chest as if his heart is finally unclenched. But the storytellers don't stop there. They never let you stop there, because a vow is not a single moment. It's a rope you throw into the future. And once you've thrown it, it keeps catching on things. It catches on succession. It catches on duty. It catches on people who were never asked if they wanted to be tied up in it. Bhishma's promise saves his father's love story. And then it becomes the frame of everything that goes wrong afterward. Not because vows are bad, not because devotion is foolish, but because certainty has a cost. A promise made in one clean moment has to survive 1,000 messy ones. You saw that mess in Kashi. Bhishma rides in like a storm, unstoppable, and for a breath it almost feels thrilling. Arrows hissing, horses straining, silk whipping against skin, the whole world narrowed down to speed and skill. Then the chariot stops. A woman speaks. Amba's voice changes the air. And suddenly you're not in a triumph. You're in the consequence. Bhishma has done what a warrior does, taken what must be taken for the throne. And yet, right there, you can feel Dharma split into two roads beneath your feet. One road is duty to the kingdom. The other road is duty to the human being sitting in your chariot, shaking with a life she didn't choose. He tries to do the right thing. He releases her, and still, the rope has already wrapped itself around her fate, her breath. That's one of the great, quiet teachings here. Even when you correct yourself, the world doesn't always reset. Some moments can't be made unhappen. They just keep walking forward, wearing new faces. Then comes the long middle, those 60 years of watching. This is where the story stops being about one heroic act and becomes about a lifetime. And this, maybe, is where it becomes uncomfortably familiar. Because Bhishma isn't defeated by lack of strength. He's defeated by staying in place. You were there in the court, feeling the heat, trapped under high ceilings, smelling ghee lamps and sweat and expensive sandalwood, while ugly choices were dressed up as formalities. You watched a boy grow cruel. You watched elders go silent. You watched laws become excuses. Bhishma keeps his vow again and again and again. He serves whoever sits on the throne because he promised. He stands like a pillar because he promised. And the problem with pillars is that they don't move when the house is burning. This is where karma becomes something you can almost touch, not as punishment, not as a cosmic slap, as the long unwinding of choices. A vow isn't only words, it's action repeated until it becomes a track in the earth. And once that track is deep enough, even a great man can start walking it without noticing. He can start calling it duty when it has become habit. He can start calling it righteousness when it has become identity. Karma here is the way a single decision keeps echoing, through children not yet born, through wars not yet imagined. It is cause and effect with a long memory. And then Kurukshetra arrives. The field is dry. The sky is too bright. The air tastes like dust. Conches split the morning. and every sound feels like it lands inside your chest. The war is enormous, but the lesson is intimate, because Bhishma is forced to fight the boys he raised, and he does it. Not with joy, not with hatred, with duty. He is terrifying on that field, not because he enjoys destruction, but because he is perfected. He is a man who has spent a lifetime refusing to bend. When you never bend, you become very hard to stop, and that's when the oldest promise in the whole tale returns. Wearing armor, Shikhandi. A vow meets another vow. A certainty meets an old wound. Bhishma refuses to strike Shikhandi. He will not cross that line. And in that refusal is the strangest mercy. Even now, even after everything, he still has a boundary. He still has something inside him that says, this far and no farther. That boundary becomes the opening that brings him down. The arrows come. The great warrior falls. And he doesn't even touch the earth. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally suspended, held up by what has always held him up, his own choices. Then the bed of arrows becomes a place of teaching. This is important too. The story could have left Bhishma as a warning and moved on, but it doesn't. It lets him lie there for weeks, the sun moving day by day, the air cooling at night, dew gathering on feathers, and enemies standing side by side with bowed heads. He speaks to Yudhishthira about kingship and restraint, about what power is supposed to be for. He gives away the knowledge he spent a lifetime collecting, as if he's finally emptying his hands. And when Krishna comes, something in Bhishma loosens at last. Not his discipline, not his honor, something deeper, the grip. All his life, Bhishma held on. He held on to the throne. He held on to the vow. He held on to the idea that if he kept his word perfectly enough, the world would eventually become orderly. At the end, he releases. And that's the resolution the storytellers offer you, gentle as it is fierce. Dharma is not always a straight line. Dharma is doing what is right in the world as it is, messy, changing, full of competing claims. Duty matters, promises matter, discipline matters. But righteousness without flexibility can become a blade that cuts the people it meant to protect. Bhishma is noble. Bhishma is catastrophic. Both are true at once. And the story doesn't force you to choose only one truth, because life never does. So what do you carry away from his ending? You carry the understanding that vows should be made with reverence, because they don't only bind you, they bind everyone who touches your life afterward. A promise made in love can still plant suffering if it refuses to adapt when the world changes. You carry the understanding that karma is patient. It doesn't rush. It doesn't shout. It just keeps unfolding the way the Ganga keeps moving day after day, carrying petals, carrying ashes, carrying boats, carrying the reflections of palaces and battlefields alike. And you carry one more quiet comfort. Bhishma, for all his rigidity, is granted one extraordinary mercy. He chooses his moment. He waits until the sun turns. He listens to the world. Then he lets go. The greatest warriors sometimes are not the ones who lift the sword. They are the ones who finally set it down. And if you let your mind drift back to the riverbank, back to that first dawn, everything feels connected now. The boy, the vow, the years, the field, the silence afterward. Water keeps flowing. It remembers without clinging. It touches everything without trying to own it. And somewhere beyond Kurukshetra's quiet dust, you can almost hear that river again, steady in the dark, already carrying Bhishma's name downstream, not as a burden, but as a part of the world, returning to itself. The sun has turned. The arrows have done their work. And the river just keeps flowing. Days pass the way they always do when the drums have finally gone silent. Not with a grand announcement, just one pale morning after another. You can feel it in the air first. That thick, metallic heat of the battlefield loosens its grip. The wind comes softer, carrying dust instead of rage. Somewhere far off, a bird tries out its voice again, cautious at first, then bolder, like it's checking whether the world is safe enough to sing. And through all of it, the Ganga moves. If you stand on her bank now, bare feet on cool, damp earth, you'll smell wet clay and crushed grass. You'll hear the hush of water folding over itself, patient as a breath. The surface catches the sky and breaks it into trembling pieces, as if even the heavens can't hold one shape for long. Hastinapura sits back from the river, old walls breathing in the late light. It has the quiet of a house after a long fever. The throne room is empty now. Not because there's no king, not because there are no claims left, but because the room itself feels tired. The pillars stand. The carved lions still bare their teeth. The floor is still cool marble under your palm. Yet the laughter, the shouting, the sharp slap of dice, gone. If you close your eyes, you can almost hear footsteps that used to live here. The soft drag of a robe, the heavy ring of armor, a staff tapping once, twice, as an old man crossed the hall with the whole kingdom balanced on his vow. In that same room, long ago, a young prince became Bhishma with a promise that made the gods scatter flowers. And in that same life, much later, that prince lay on arrows and chose the moment he would finally let the world continue without him. Outside, the city keeps doing what cities do. A potter turns his wheel. The clay is cool and obedient, and his hands know their work even when his mind doesn't want to think. A woman sweeps her doorway, sending little storms of dust into the sun. A pair of boys race along a lane and nearly crash into a goat that has absolutely no interest in moving for anybody. Somewhere, someone lights a lamp. The wick drinks ghee, and the flame steadies, small and stubborn. The kind of light that doesn't care whether kings rise or fall. The smell is warm, familiar. It makes a home out of air. And somewhere, in a courtyard where jasmine creeps over a wall, a mother is telling her child a bedtime tale. You see them without trying. The child is half asleep already, cheek pressed to a thin cotton pillow, hair damp from a bath. The mother sits close, combing through tangles with patient fingers. Her bangles click softly, a rhythm gentler than any war drum. She tells the child about a man who once stood taller than every oath in the world. About how he gave up a throne before he ever sat on it. About how he kept his word so fiercely that even time seemed to step aside for him. About how he fought with a heart that never truly hardened, even when his hands had to be strong. And when the child asks why such a man would choose to end his life on a field of arrows, the mother doesn't make it frightening. She makes it quiet. She explains that he waited, that he listened, that he chose his moment the way a wise traveler chooses the safest ford in a wild river. She smooths the child's hair and, almost without thinking, lets one small line slip out. Just one, soft as a blessing. He decided when to go. The child doesn't ask anything after that. The child just breathes. Because that's the strange comfort, isn't it? Not that the world is fair, Not that promises always protect you, not that great men are spared, but that somewhere inside all that noise, someone found one clean choice, a choice made without panic, a choice made at the turning of the sun. Back on the riverbank, evening settles. The light turns honey-colored and then deepens into copper. The Ganga takes it all on her surface, every shifting shade, then carries it away as if she's used to holding beauty without trying to keep it. You're standing there now, and the air cools against your skin. A breeze brings the scent of river reeds and distant cooking fires. From a village across the water comes the faint sound of a bell, one note, then another, like someone reminding the night to be gentle. The water laps at the shore with a lazy, practiced touch. A leaf drifts by, then another. Somewhere upstream, petals, marigold and rose, spin in slow circles before surrendering to the current. They don't fight it, they don't hurry, they just go. And if you listen closely, without straining, you can almost imagine the river carrying names the way she carries everything else. Shantanu, walking into dawn. Ganga, smiling like a secret. Devavrata, still a boy, still too bright. Bhishma, old at last, finally weightless. The night gathers itself over Hastinapura. Roofs and trees become silhouettes. Lamps wink on one by one, tiny islands of gold. The palace walls fade into darkness, and the river keeps shining, moving ribbon of black glass beneath a sky full of quiet. No trumpets, no final command, just water, still flowing past an ancient city, past an empty hall, past all the places where human beings tried so hard to hold the world still. And the Ganga, unbothered, unbroken, carrying the last light downstream.